Hello there, and welcome to Life Beyond Seen, where curiosity gets cozy and science takes the scenic route to sleep. Tonight's quiet journey drifts toward the very bottom of our planet, to a place so remote, so silent, and so old that time itself seems to have slowed beneath its endless white expanse. Down there, beneath layers of ice thicker than mountains, there are secrets waiting in the cold, and some of them might just be alive. Before we settle in, I'd love to know where you're listening from tonight. Somewhere warm, perhaps, wrapped up against the chill of the world. Or maybe it's already deep night where you are, and the thought of cold feels distant and unreal. Either way, I'm glad you're here. And if you find these late-night voyages soothing, if the thought of science told softly helps you rest, it would mean a great deal if you gave this a like, or maybe subscribed, so that this calm corner of curiosity can reach others who might need a quiet place to wander. Now breathe a little slower, let your thoughts settle, and picture a world made of ice. Not the gentle cracking kind that forms in a freezer or on a window pane, but a continent-sized fortress, miles thick, ancient beyond comprehension. The South Pole is not just cold, it is the coldest, driest, windiest place on Earth. A desert made of frozen water, stretching so far that it holds nearly 70% of the planet's fresh water, locked in layers that preserve the history of air itself. Every snowfall that lands there becomes part of a story written in white, each flake compressing into the next, building a record of time that goes back millions of years. But what lies beneath all that? What waits under 3 kilometers of ice where no light has reached for eons? For a long time, no one asked that question seriously. Antarctica was viewed as a barren wasteland, a place where life ended. Early explorers who braved its endless white plains described it as lifeless, timeless, and silent. When they planted their flags, they believed they stood on solid ground. But they were wrong. Beneath their boots lay not bedrock, but a world of water, dark, sealed away, and possibly teeming with hidden biology. Scientists would later discover that Antarctica isn't one block of ice at all. It's a living, shifting shell that flows and creeps like an extremely slow river. Under the pressure of its own weight, the ice deforms, sliding over valleys and ridges, moving toward the sea. And in that movement, something remarkable happens. Friction and pressure cause melting at the bottom, creating pockets of liquid water trapped between the ice and the rock below. These are not puddles or cracks. They're lakes, some larger than entire countries, sealed beneath the ice for millions of years. The largest of them, Lake Vostok, lies beneath nearly 4 kilometers of solid ice. To reach it is like trying to drill through time itself. For decades, it was only a theory, a strange anomaly revealed by radar in the 1990s. But as instruments improved, scientists confirmed that not only did this buried lake exist, but there were hundreds more. Subglacial lakes, rivers, and channels spreading under the continent like veins in a sleeping body. And where there is water, no matter how cold, dark, or cut off, life has a tendency to find a way. It's almost strange how easily we assume that life belongs to sunlight. We picture forests, reefs, grasslands, and cities, all buzzing with energy drawn from the sun. Yet life has never been loyal to warmth. It's been found thriving in volcanic vents, in acid pools, in caves where oxygen is nearly gone, in the frozen brine of Arctic permafrost. Bacteria, fungi, and tiny multicellular organisms have been recovered from places that no human could survive for minutes. Each discovery expands our idea of what's possible, and each one whispers the same thing. If it can live here, it can live there too. That's why scientists look beneath the South Pole with a kind of reverent curiosity. It's not just about discovering what's under the ice. It's about understanding what life is capable of. The water down there has been sealed for perhaps 15 million years, isolated since before humans existed, maybe even before modern mammals evolved. Whatever microbes, if any, survive in that liquid darkness, They may carry genetic traces from a time when the world was unrecognizable. They could reveal how life adapted to extreme isolation, how it resisted starvation and radiation, and maybe even how it originated. Imagine that for a moment. A lake that has never felt sunlight, that has never exchanged gases with the atmosphere, that has been locked away since before the first humans shaped stone into tools. The temperature is below freezing, but the pressure from the ice keeps the water liquid. There's no photosynthesis, no open air, no seasons, just quiet, and the slow drift of chemical reactions feeding an invisible ecosystem. If something is alive there, it's living by rules we barely understand. There's a strange peace in that thought. The idea that under the harshest, loneliest place on Earth, there might be movement too small for any eye to see. Tiny cells dividing in silence, nourished by minerals from the bedrock or by the chemical energy of decaying elements, each one a survivor of unimaginable endurance. We think of life as fragile, but perhaps it's the most resilient force in the universe. Of course, reaching that buried world is no easy task. To touch it risks contaminating it. Drilling through kilometers of ice with any machine that uses fuel or chemicals could introduce modern microbes, destroying whatever ancient record lies within. So scientists have to work with near obsessive caution. They develop clean drilling systems, sterilized probes, and sealed containers that can reach through the ice without letting anything leak in or out. The process takes years, often decades, and every new borehole is both a triumph and a test of patience. When Russian researchers at the Vostok station first reached the buried lake in 2012, the world held its breath. They had drilled for more than 2 decades, using a mixture of kerosene and freon to prevent the hole from freezing shut. When they finally broke through, they didn't take direct samples, just water that had seeped up and refrozen in the borehole. Even so, what they found inside stunned scientists. There were traces of microbial DNA, strange sequences unlike anything seen before. Some suspected contamination. Others believed they had glimpsed an ancient biosphere. The debate continues even now, unresolved and fascinating. But one thing is clear. Beneath the South Pole, there is an ecosystem of possibilities. Even if no organism lives there now, the chemistry alone could tell stories of ancient oceans and early Earth. And if life does exist beneath the ice, it would be proof that biology can endure in total isolation, without sunlight, in conditions nearly identical to the icy moons of Jupiter and Saturn. That realization ties our planet to the rest of the solar system in an unexpectedly intimate way. Antarctica becomes a mirror, a reminder that before we look for life beyond Earth, we might need to understand the life that hides beneath our own feet. As the years pass, scientists continue to refine their methods. Satellite data reveal shifting patterns in the ice sheet, rivers that flow beneath the surface, lakes that fill and drain in cycles lasting decades. These hidden waters reshape the continent from below, influencing how glaciers move and how the ocean rises. What was once thought static is now known to be dynamic, alive in its own glacial rhythm. It's easy to forget that this frozen landscape is in motion, slowly pulsing with liquid water that never sees the light of day. If you could stand there, truly stand there, at the centre of the South Pole, you'd see nothing but white in every direction. No horizon, no trees, no sound but the wind. Beneath your boots, miles below, is a world that hasn't seen the sky in millions of years. It's humbling to imagine that somewhere down there, microscopic survivors may be quietly metabolizing, drifting, dividing. Their world is measured not in days or seasons, but in geological patience. And yet they are part of the same biosphere as us, linked by the same evolutionary thread. This is what draws scientists to endure the cold, the isolation, the endless logistics of Antarctic research. It's not just curiosity, it's reverence. They're not searching for monsters or lost civilizations, but for the smallest forms of life that remind us how vast existence really is. Every ice core, every filtered droplet of meltwater is a message from a time long before human eyes ever looked south. Even if we find only traces, chemical signatures, ancient DNA fragments, or the fossilized remains of microbes long dead, they will still speak volumes. They will tell us about survival, about adaptation, about the deep persistence of life through planetary change. They may show us how Earth recovered from past ice ages, how it cycled through warmth and cold, and how biology followed quietly through it all. Some researchers think the study of Antarctic subglacial life could even rewrite our definitions of habitability. We've long believed that life requires sunlight, warmth, and open water. But if it exists under Antarctica, sealed beneath rock-hard ice, then the same principles might apply elsewhere. Moons like Europa and Enceladus, with their icy crusts and subsurface oceans, suddenly become less alien. They start to look familiar, like cold cousins of a hidden world right here on Earth. And so, when scientists camp on the ice and peer through radar maps of what lies below, they're not just studying our planet's geology, they're looking for echoes of the cosmos. The frozen lakes beneath the South Pole are not just places, they're analogues for other worlds. In studying them, we learn how to look for life beyond Earth, how to recognize it, and perhaps how to protect it when we find it. What's most remarkable is that all of this happens in silence. There are no eruptions, no glowing colours, no visible signs of the life that might be there. Just the slow pressure of ice, the faint hum of scientific equipment, and the patience of a planet that moves at a pace we can barely comprehend. It's the kind of mystery that doesn't demand an answer. It invites one. The ice beneath the South Pole may hide ancient life, or it may simply hold the conditions that once allowed it. Either way, it reminds us that the line between alive and lifeless, between ancient and eternal, is thinner than we think. The cold does not erase, it preserves, and what it preserves may yet speak. As night deepens and your thoughts drift, imagine that frozen continent again, the surface, bright and windswept, endless and still. The ice below, compacted and clear, layer upon layer of ancient snow, and far beneath that, a lake, silent and dark, where time barely moves. Somewhere down there, in that alien water, something might stir. Not a monster, not a mystery to fear, but a cell dividing quietly in the dark as it has for millions of years. And as strange as it sounds, that tiny movement connects you to it, to the vast history of life on this planet and the patience of the universe itself. The ice is not empty. It listens, it remembers, and it holds. And as we begin to explore what lies beneath, we are really exploring the story of life itself, what it is, where it began, and where it might still be waiting. The world above that buried water is nothing less than an ocean of ice. To most people, Antarctica seems simple, almost blank, as if it were only white stretched to infinity. But that endless white is an illusion. Beneath it lies a complex landscape shaped by mountains, valleys, rivers, and entire ancient coastlines crushed and hidden under ice so thick that light itself can't find a way through. When explorers describe standing on the Antarctic plateau, they talk about how the horizon disappears into itself. There are no trees or landmarks, no sense of scale or direction. The sky blends with the snow until you can't tell where one ends and the other begins. It's not so much a place as a sensation, the feeling of being surrounded by everything and nothing at once. If you were to look at the continent from space, you'd see a sheet of white covering almost everything. Only a few jagged ridges of dark rock pierce through, known as nunataks, the lonely tops of mountains that once towered over forests and rivers before the ice came. Every other part of the landscape is buried beneath kilometres of frozen history. This sheet of ice, smooth from above but wildly uneven below, hides rivers that flow without ever seeing the sky, and lakes that haven't felt wind in millions of years. The ice itself moves, slow and heavy, like a continent-sized glacier constantly creeping toward the ocean. It looks solid, but it breathes. The weight of all that ice pushes the crust of the Earth downward, bending it like a soft drumhead. Beneath that pressure, rock cracks and grinds, and heat from the planet's core seeps upward. It's strange to think that under the coldest place on Earth there is warmth. Not much, just enough to keep water liquid in the deepest layers. That thin balance between freezing and melting is what makes the hidden rivers possible. Every so often the ice melts slightly, and water seeps through microscopic channels. Gravity draws it downward, where it pools in valleys and hollows, forming hidden lakes. They aren't still. They move slowly under the weight of the ice, sometimes draining into one another like underground tides. For a long time, we didn't know these hidden waters existed. The ice is too thick for ordinary drilling, and the landscape is too remote for direct exploration. But radar changed everything. Airborne surveys bounced radio waves through the ice, and the echoes that came back revealed smooth, reflective surfaces deep below, places where water lay trapped. These discoveries transformed our understanding of Antarctica. What we once thought was static and lifeless turned out to be dynamic and alive, a complex network of moving ice and water connecting the interior of the continent to the sea. Each discovery led to more questions. If water was moving beneath the ice, how much of it was there? How fast was it flowing, and could it support life? The more scientists looked, the more they realized that Antarctica wasn't just an archive of the past. It was a living system. The ice moves, the water shifts, and the entire structure changes shape over time. Beneath the quiet surface, the continent pulses with a rhythm of its own. In some places, the ice is so clear that it traps tiny bubbles of ancient air. Cores drilled from these layers act like time capsules, preserving a record of Earth's atmosphere from hundreds of thousands of years ago. Scientists can read them like pages in a frozen book, analysing the trapped gases to reconstruct past climates. From those bubbles, we've learned about ice ages, volcanic eruptions, and how the balance of carbon dioxide and methane has shifted over eons. Each bubble holds a whisper of the world that once was, but beneath the layers of ancient air, below the reach of those cores, the story changes. Down there, the ice grows darker, denser, and eventually gives way to liquid. That boundary, where solid meets fluid, marks one of the strangest frontiers on Earth. To imagine what it's like, think of the deepest cave you've ever seen. Now fill it with silence and remove every trace of light. Replace the stone walls with ice that glows faintly blue, not from illumination but from the way the crystal structure bends and scatters what little light can reach that far. It's a blue that feels ancient, heavy and infinite, the colour of pressure and time. That is the hidden blue beneath the white, a hue that exists only in places where sunlight dies and the world holds its breath. When researchers lower instruments into boreholes, the light from their cameras fades to black within seconds. What returns to the surface is not an image of clarity, but a strange, dreamlike landscape. Ice walls that seem to flow, tiny air pockets sparkling like stars, and sometimes a faint shimmer of sediment drifting through the water. These sediments are clues, traces of crushed rock, organic matter, maybe even remnants of once living things carried there long before the continent froze. Each fragment is a letter in a story still being translated. What fascinates scientists most is how stable this world is. On the surface, Antarctica experiences fierce storms and dramatic temperature swings, but beneath the ice, everything changes slowly. The water doesn't freeze because of the pressure. It doesn't boil because there's no air. Temperatures hover around -2 degrees Celsius, just below freezing, and yet that is enough for water to remain liquid. Chemical reactions happen there at a glacial pace, allowing microorganisms, if any exist, to adapt in ways that defy ordinary biology. The energy sources are minimal. minerals from the bedrock, trace gases, perhaps tiny amounts of heat from radioactive decay. But for microbes, that can be enough. When scientists study life in extreme environments elsewhere on Earth, deep-sea vents, salt flats, polar deserts, they often find the same surprising pattern. Wherever there's even a hint of water and energy, something has found a way to use it. Bacteria that feed on iron, archaea that thrive on methane, fungi that survive on bare rock, all show that life is an opportunist. It doesn't need comfort, only possibility. If that rule holds true beneath the Antarctic ice, then those buried lakes might host ecosystems completely cut off from the surface. It wouldn't be life as we know it. No plants, no animals, no photosynthesis, but a microscopic community surviving quietly on chemical whispers from the rocks below. The thought of that changes how we see the planet. Antarctica stops being a wasteland and becomes a hidden ocean world. The ice above acts as both shield and shroud, preserving conditions that may resemble those of early Earth. Billions of years ago, before the atmosphere thickened and the seas filled with oxygen, life may have looked much the same, simple, microscopic, self-sufficient. Studying these environments could show how those first organisms adapted, how they built metabolisms that functioned without sunlight, and how they endured through cataclysms that wiped out entire species. In some ways, exploring Antarctica is like exploring a memory. The ice sheet hides layers of time, and the lakes beneath it might hold the echoes of an ancient biosphere. Every sample of sediment or frozen water tells us a little more about how the planet evolved. Even if we never find living cells, the chemical fingerprints left behind could reveal how long they survived, how they consumed and produced energy, and what kind of environment allowed them to persist. Getting those answers requires technology that's equal parts precise and patient. Drilling through 3 or 4 kilometers of ice isn't just a technical challenge, it's a moral one. Scientists have to be absolutely certain that their equipment won't contaminate what it touches. A single microbe from the surface could ruin an entire experiment, masking the real signals with modern life. To prevent that, research teams design sterilized probes that melt their way downward using hot water or lasers, sealing behind them as they go. It's an exercise in trust and restraint, a balance between curiosity and caution. When the first radar images of subglacial lakes appeared, they showed a landscape that no one expected. Some lakes were small, just a few kilometers wide. Others stretched for hundreds of kilometers, linked by channels that rose and fell like hidden rivers. In some regions, the lakes drained and refilled over the course of years, hinting at a vast, slow circulation of water under the ice. It's a system both ancient and alive, constantly reshaping itself in the dark. Scientists now think there are more than 400 lakes beneath the Antarctic ice. Some lie close to the surface, others deep below. The largest, Lake Vostok, covers an area comparable to Lake Ontario and is more than 1,000 meters deep. The water there hasn't touched the atmosphere for at least 15 million years. That number is difficult to comprehend. In that time, continents have moved, climates have shifted, and entire species have risen and vanished. Yet this lake has remained sealed, preserved by ice thicker than the tallest mountains. Standing at the surface, you'd never know it's there. The snow underfoot looks the same as anywhere else, flat, bright, featureless. Only instruments reveal what lies below, and yet the knowledge changes how you feel about the landscape. It's no longer empty, it's layered with secrets. The endless white hides a hidden blue, and that blue hides a history still unfolding. In the stillness of that frozen desert, scientists have to work with precision and humility. Every movement, every piece of equipment must be planned months in advance. Supply flights are rare, the weather unpredictable, and the margin for error small. Research teams live in isolated camps, their world reduced to the hum of generators and the crackle of radios. Outside, the air is so dry and cold that even sound seems thinner. But they keep working, because what waits beneath them could change what we know about life itself. Antarctica is, in many ways, a paradox. It's both fragile and eternal, hostile and nurturing. The same ice that can kill in minutes also preserves the memory of the planet better than any other place. It's a record keeper that asks nothing in return, only silence and patience. Every core of ice, every radar scan, every droplet of meltwater adds to a growing picture of how the Earth's hidden systems work. Those systems don't just matter for the sake of curiosity, they influence the entire planet. The flow of subglacial water affects how ice moves, how glaciers slide into the sea, and ultimately how fast sea levels rise. The deeper we look, the more we realise that the fate of Antarctica is tied to our own. The blue beneath the white isn't only a scientific curiosity, it's a reminder that even in the most extreme places the planet remains alive. The ice moves, the water flows, and the chemistry of life continues quietly out of sight. For scientists who study these hidden worlds, that realization brings both wonder and responsibility. They are not just explorers, they are caretakers of a record older than humanity itself. The story of Antarctica is still being written, line by frozen line. The radar maps improve each year, the drilling becomes cleaner, and the questions grow deeper. How old are these lakes? How many are connected? What do they tell us about the last time the Earth warmed? Somewhere in the answers lies the story of our planet's resilience, the ability to hold life through ice and darkness, to keep moving even when the surface seems still. If you close your eyes and picture that endless white again, it's easier now to imagine what lies beneath. The silence above, the slow pulse of liquid below, the subtle gradient of colour from white to blue. It's a landscape of contradictions, frozen but fluid, ancient but alive. And within that contradiction, you can feel the quiet persistence of life itself, waiting for the next moment when someone finally listens closely enough to hear it. Far beneath that thick expanse of ice, where pressure flattens everything into slow motion and time seems to lose its meaning, there are rivers that move in darkness. They don't sparkle, they don't roar, and they don't reflect the sky. They slide quietly between bedrock and ice, invisible and persistent. When scientists first realized that these rivers existed, it seemed almost impossible. How could water flow in a place so cold that even air becomes brittle? But Antarctica is full of contradictions, and its buried waterways are one of its strangest. The rivers beneath the South Pole don't behave like the rivers we know. They aren't carved by rain or shaped by seasons. They flow because of pressure and heat, and because the Earth itself refuses to stay still. The weight of kilometres of ice above pushes down with such force that it changes the rules of freezing. Water, under enough pressure, melts at temperatures below zero. Add a touch of geothermal warmth from the rocks beneath, and pockets of liquid begin to form. Gravity does the rest. The water finds a path trickling through tiny cracks and channels, merging into streams that slide unseen toward deeper basins. What's extraordinary about these rivers is how organised they are. When scientists mapped them using radar and satellite data, they discovered an entire network connecting the interior of Antarctica to the edges of the continent. These are not random puddles. They are structured systems, shaped by topography and ice movement, running for hundreds of kilometres under the frozen crust. Some of them feed into subglacial lakes, while others drain them, carrying meltwater slowly toward the sea. The flow is glacial in every sense, centimetres per day rather than metres per second. But it never stops. Each of these buried rivers plays a crucial role in how Antarctica breathes. They lubricate the base of glaciers, allowing them to slide more easily toward the ocean. When water pressure builds, glaciers move faster. When it drops, they slow down. That means these hidden streams are part of the engine that drives the continent's ice flow. A change deep below, perhaps a new melt pocket forming or an underground lake draining, can affect the movement of ice hundreds of kilometers away. It's a reminder that even in the most frozen places, the planet's systems remain in motion. The discovery of these rivers came slowly. Early radar surveys hinted at strange anomalies, flat reflective surfaces, long narrow bands where echoes behaved differently. For years, scientists debated what they meant. It wasn't until detailed ice-penetrating radar from aircraft and satellites became available that the full picture emerged. Beneath the surface was a vast hydrological network, hidden but active, threading through the continent like veins through stone. One river in particular, recently mapped, runs for nearly 300 kilometers, draining a large portion of East Antarctica's interior. It's larger than any river ever imagined in such a place. What makes these waterways even more interesting is what they might carry. They're not just moving water, they're moving history. As they slide along the bedrock, they pick up minerals, sediments, and possibly microorganisms that have been sealed away for millions of years. The currents could transport nutrients from one lake to another, linking isolated ecosystems into a slow subterranean exchange. If life exists beneath the Antarctic ice, these rivers are likely its lifelines, the invisible arteries that sustain it. The chemistry of these rivers is unusual. With no sunlight and no photosynthesis, any potential life must rely on chemical energy. That could mean feeding on minerals like iron, sulfur, or ammonia, or using small traces of organic matter that drift through the water. Similar systems exist elsewhere on Earth, in caves and deep-sea vents, where microbes thrive without light, living off reactions between rock and water. Those comparisons are what make Antarctica's buried rivers so fascinating to astrobiologists. They may represent one of the closest analogues to conditions on icy moons, such as Europa or Enceladus. In both cases, there's ice above, rock below, and the faint heat of a world still turning inside. In the darkness beneath the South Pole, there are no seasons, no sunlight, no surface storms, yet change still happens. Pressure shifts, glaciers slide, and the rivers adjust their courses. They may swell or shrink as lakes above them drain or refill. In 2007, satellite observations revealed something astonishing. One subglacial lake suddenly emptied, and another hundreds of kilometers away filled up shortly afterward. The only explanation was that a river had connected them, allowing a pulse of water to travel unseen through the ice. It took months to complete the journey, but it proved that Antarctica's hidden waterways are interconnected, part of a single slow system that spans much of the continent. To study these rivers is a challenge unlike any other. You can't simply dig a trench or lower a camera. The ice above is solid, shifting, and kilometers thick. Scientists rely on radar, gravity mapping, and ice-penetrating sensors to build indirect pictures. Sometimes they use seismic waves, small vibrations that travel through the ice and reflect off different layers. By analysing the echoes, they can infer where water lies, how thick it is, and how it moves. The data is complex and never perfect, but together it paints a portrait of a hidden landscape that feels almost alive. Understanding how these rivers behave matters far beyond the pursuit of curiosity. They play a major role in how Antarctica interacts with the rest of the planet. When subglacial water flows to the coast, it can affect ice shelves, those vast floating extensions of the ice sheet that hold back the glaciers. If too much water accumulates at their base, it can lift and weaken them, making it easier for chunks to break off and drift into the sea. Each fracture, each iceberg, contributes in small ways to rising sea levels. What happens in the darkness beneath the ice, in other words, influences the coastlines of the entire world. But the story of these rivers isn't only one of mechanics. There's something strangely intimate about them, something that connects deeply with the nature of life itself. They exist without ever seeing the sky, moving in total silence through a world that hasn't changed for millions of years. If you could somehow be there, floating in that cold black water, surrounded by walls of clear ice, you would see a world that feels completely alien. The only light would come from the faint glow of minerals reflecting off your equipment. The temperature would hover just below freezing. Every sound would be absorbed. The flow would be so slow you might not even sense movement, yet it would continue, patient and unstoppable. Scientists have begun to sample water from shallower subglacial systems, places where the ice is thinner or where the rivers come close to the surface. What they've found is encouraging. Some samples contain trace amounts of organic compounds, the building blocks of life. Others show evidence of chemical reactions between rock and water that could produce the energy needed for microbes to survive. These clues suggest that even in complete darkness, a subtle form of life could exist, not thriving perhaps, but persisting, waiting. The search for such life requires extraordinary care. Every tool that touches the ice must be sterilized, every drop of drilling fluid filtered. Even the smallest contamination from the surface could destroy the fragile balance below. Some research teams have spent decades developing methods that use only clean, hot water to melt through the ice, avoiding chemicals altogether. The goal is simple: to observe without disturbing, to touch without changing. It's a kind of scientific mindfulness, where restraint becomes as important as discovery. There's also a poetic symmetry in how these buried rivers echo the early Earth. Billions of years ago, before the first plants or animals, the planet may have looked more like Antarctica than anything else. Ice and rock, darkness and water, chemistry and persistence. In that environment, primitive microbes learned to harness chemical gradients for energy. They didn't need sunlight or oxygen, just the right minerals and patience. The rivers beneath the South Pole might mirror that process, still running after all this time. Studying them could show us what the first stirrings of metabolism looked like, how life began in the absence of warmth and light. It's humbling to think that while we search for life on other planets, we may still be discovering its oldest forms right here. The ice at the bottom of the world is not just a frozen archive, it's an experiment that's been running uninterrupted for millions of years. Every molecule of water that flows beneath it carries information about temperature, chemistry, and biological potential. Every trace of carbon or sulfur could be a signature of something once alive. The deeper scientists go, the more it feels like reading a diary written by the planet itself. These discoveries are changing how we define habitability. It's no longer just about sunlight and warmth. It's about stability, protection, and the persistence of liquid water. The Antarctic subglacial system proves that life doesn't need open air or green landscapes. It only needs time and a place to hold on. That realization reshapes not just our understanding of Earth, but of every icy world we've yet to explore. If microbes can exist in these cold, dark rivers, then perhaps they can also swim beneath the crust of Europa, or drift in the hidden seas of Enceladus. The distance between those worlds and ours begins to feel smaller, connected by the shared logic of survival. Back on the surface, the people who study these rivers often describe a sense of awe that's difficult to put into words. It's not just about the data. It's about the awareness that right under their feet, beneath layers of silence, an entire system is moving. Some compare it to standing above a living organism, a heartbeat that can't be seen but can be felt through the instruments. The ice responds to that movement. It creaks, shifts, and sometimes rises or falls by centimeters as water flows underneath. Even satellites can detect those subtle changes, translating them into maps of invisible motion. The more we learn, the more it becomes clear that Antarctica isn't a static wilderness, but a place of quiet transformation. Its rivers carry not just water, but stories of climate cycles, of ancient ecosystems, of the deep connection between rock, ice, and life. Every drop that moves through those channels is part of a process millions of years in the making. And though we can't see them directly, we can imagine them, winding through the darkness like patient signatures of endurance. Understanding those systems isn't only an academic pursuit, it's essential for predicting the future. As the climate warms even slightly, the balance of ice and water in Antarctica will shift. More melting at the base could mean faster glacier flow, more discharge into the sea, and greater instability at the ice margins. By studying the hidden rivers now, scientists are learning how to anticipate those changes, how to protect coastal communities, and how to recognize the early signs of transformation. In a way, the rivers beneath the ice are like messengers, telling us what the planet is planning before it speaks more loudly through rising seas. When you think about it that way, these buried streams are both ancient and immediate. They remember the deep past and hint at the near future. They connect the frozen center of the Earth's coldest continent to the rest of the planet's moving water. And through them, the idea of separation between surface and depth, past and present, living and still, starts to fade. It becomes clear that nothing on this planet is ever truly alone. Even in the deepest darkness, movement continues, and where there is movement, there is potential. If you listen long enough, you can almost sense it. Not the sound of water itself, it's far too deep and muffled for that, but the quiet certainty that beneath all that white silence, the world is still flowing. The rivers that move without light are not waiting for us to find them. They've been there all along, shaping the ice from below, whispering the story of a planet that never really sleeps. And as the ice keeps shifting, the next part of that story begins where the rivers lead, into the vast sealed basins that hold the oldest and most mysterious water on Earth. Down there, far below even the hidden streams, the real secret waits, preserved in darkness for millions of years, carrying within it the memory of ancient life and the promise of discovery yet to come. Beneath those buried rivers lies a stillness so complete that even time seems reluctant to move. The water there has not seen sunlight since before the first forests grew on Earth. It has not mixed with the atmosphere, not felt a wave, not known a storm. It lies sealed under kilometers of ice, in a kind of suspended state that defies imagination. Scientists call these places subglacial lakes, but the word lake hardly does them justice. They are ancient reservoirs of water older than most mountain ranges, trapped between ice and rock in conditions that have remained unchanged for millions of years. If you could somehow look inside one, you'd be staring at a mirror of Earth's distant past, a glimpse into what the planet once was and maybe into how life began. The most famous of these hidden lakes is Lake Vostok, buried beneath nearly 4 kilometers of Antarctic ice. It stretches for more than 200 kilometers in length and holds as much water as one of North America's Great Lakes. For decades, no one knew it existed. In the mid-20th century, Soviet scientists stationed at the remote Vostok research base noticed odd readings in their seismic data suggesting something soft beneath the ice. Later, radar surveys confirmed what they had suspected: a massive body of liquid water sealed away, completely isolated from the surface. What made it remarkable wasn't just its size, but its age. Geological studies suggest that the ice above has kept it cut off from the atmosphere for at least 15 million years. During that time, continents shifted, climates changed, species rose and fell, and the lake remained undisturbed. It's difficult to overstate what that kind of isolation means. The surface world has undergone mass extinctions, ice ages, and global warmings. Oceans have changed their chemistry, and the air has traded compositions more than once. But Lake Vostok has been shielded from it all. No sunlight penetrates that far, and the water remains liquid only because of pressure from above and heat from below. The temperature hovers around -3 degrees Celsius, yet it never freezes. The ice acts like a lid, insulating the lake from the brutal cold above. Every molecule of water inside it has been circulating quietly for millions of years, perhaps carrying traces of ancient sediments, and maybe even life forms that evolved in total isolation. When scientists first began to think seriously about what could live in such a place, the debate was fierce. Some argued that nothing could survive that long without new nutrients or sunlight. Others pointed out that life is remarkably adaptable and that microbes on Earth have been found in places that seem far less hospitable, inside volcanic rock, deep under the ocean floor or frozen within permafrost. Microorganisms, after all, do not need much to survive, just a source of energy and a way to keep their internal chemistry running. If they could find that beneath the Antarctic ice, then life there might not only exist, but thrive in its own slow way. Lake Vostok isn't alone. Scientists have identified more than 400 subglacial lakes scattered across Antarctica, many of them connected by the underground rivers that flow through the darkness. Some are small, only a few kilometers wide. Others stretch for hundreds of kilometers beneath the ice. Each one tells a different story. Some fill and drain in cycles that take years, suggesting that water flows between them like a slow heartbeat. Others are completely sealed, their surfaces never touched by a single bubble from the outside world. Collectively, they represent one of the last unexplored ecosystems on Earth. Accessing those lakes has become one of the great scientific challenges of our time. The problem isn't just the distance or the cold, it's the responsibility. To reach the water, scientists must drill through several kilometers of ice without introducing modern contamination. A single drop of oil, a fragment of skin, or a stray bacterium from the surface could destroy any evidence of native life. It's a challenge that has demanded new technologies, clean drilling systems, and careful patience. When researchers at the Vostok station finally managed to break through to the lake in 2012, after 2 decades of work, they did so with extreme caution. They didn't take direct samples from the lake itself, but from the refrozen ice that seeped upward after the drill reached the water. Even that indirect sample was enough to provoke excitement. Inside it were traces of microbial DNA, strange sequences that didn't match known species. Some scientists believed these fragments represented contamination from the drilling process. Others thought they might be genuine, remnants of organisms that had lived and evolved in the lake's isolation. The truth remains uncertain, but the finding ignited a renewed sense of wonder. If there was even a small chance that life persisted there, it meant the possibilities for life elsewhere in the universe had just widened dramatically. To understand why, it helps to look at what conditions in Lake Vostok are like. The water is under immense pressure, nearly 400 times that at the surface. There is no light, no photosynthesis, and very little oxygen. Yet chemical reactions between rock, water, and sediment could provide a steady, if minimal, source of energy. Minerals containing iron or sulfur might serve as food for microbes capable of chemosynthesis, converting inorganic compounds into usable energy, much like bacteria living near deep-sea hydrothermal vents. The sediment at the bottom of the lake could also hold ancient organic matter, trapped there when the lake first formed millions of years ago. Slowly, steadily, that material could still be breaking down, feeding microscopic ecosystems that have never seen the surface. Every layer of ice above the lake tells a part of its story. The deeper scientists drill, the older the ice becomes, preserving tiny samples of the environment from different eras. Just above the lake, they find what's known as accretion ice, frozen water that once belonged to the lake itself before refreezing as it came into contact with the overlying ice sheet. This layer acts as a bridge between the isolated lake and the world above, and studying it allows researchers to infer what lies beneath without fully breaching the lake. In those samples, scientists have found evidence of salts, organic molecules, and even microscopic structures resembling bacteria. Nothing conclusive, but enough to suggest that the lake below is chemically active, possibly biologically as well. What makes the idea of life in Lake Vostok so compelling isn't just that it might exist, but what it represents. If organisms can survive there, without sunlight, cut off from the biosphere, under immense pressure, in near-freezing temperatures, then life might not be as fragile as we once thought. It might be a fundamental property of matter when the right conditions align. The same processes that sustain life under the Antarctic ice could easily operate beneath the crusts of icy moons like Europa or Enceladus, where oceans exist below layers of frozen surface. In that sense, every core sample from Antarctica is also a rehearsal for future missions beyond Earth. The isolation of these lakes is both a gift and a challenge. It allows scientists to study a system untouched by modern life, but it also means that what they find could be completely unlike anything we know. Evolution in isolation produces strange results. On islands, it gives rise to flightless birds and unique ecosystems. Under ice, it might produce microbes with unfamiliar biochemistry, perhaps using different enzymes, or tolerating pressures and temperatures no surface organism could endure. Such discoveries would not only expand the tree of life, but also reshape our understanding of biology itself. Working in Antarctica to pursue these mysteries requires endurance of a different kind. The researchers live in some of the harshest conditions on Earth. The temperature can drop below minus 60 degrees Celsius, and the winds can tear through camp like a living thing. Days and nights blur into one another. Equipment freezes. Supplies must be flown in by aircraft that can only land a few months each year. Every step of progress is measured in patience. But ask any scientist who's spent time there, and they'll tell you it's worth it. Standing on that frozen plain, knowing what lies beneath, gives a sense of awe that no laboratory can replicate. There's also a quiet philosophical dimension to all of this. The lakes beneath Antarctica are not just scientific curiosities, they're reminders of how much of the planet remains unseen. In an age when satellites map every coastline and drones fly over every forest, it's humbling to realise that entire worlds still exist beneath our feet, sealed in darkness, waiting to be understood. They remind us that discovery doesn't always happen by looking outward. Sometimes it means looking inward, downward, into the parts of Earth we've never truly touched. Beyond Lake Vostok, other subglacial lakes have drawn attention too. Lake Whillans, for example, lies under less ice and has been successfully sampled using a clean hot water drill. In 2013, researchers retrieved water and sediment directly from it without contamination. To their astonishment, they found living microbes, entire communities of bacteria that had been surviving under the ice. These weren't remnants or fossils, they were alive, metabolizing slowly in the dark. The lake itself was smaller and younger than Vostok, but its existence proved a point. Where there is liquid water, even in such extreme conditions, life can persist. That discovery strengthened the belief that Lake Vostok and others like it might also harbour living organisms, perhaps even more diverse ones, adapted over longer timescales. It also demonstrated that careful exploration is possible without damaging these fragile systems. The success of clean drilling at Lake Whillans set a precedent for future missions, showing that humanity can study such places responsibly. Each new borehole adds to a growing picture of a hidden biosphere, one that's as old as the continent itself. The age of these lakes means they may also preserve environmental records far older than any ice core. The sediments at their bottoms could contain clues about what Antarctica looked like before it froze. There might be traces of ancient forests, microbial mats, or chemical markers from prehistoric oceans. Analysing those sediments could help scientists understand how Earth transitioned from a warm, lush world to the frozen desert we see today. It could reveal how life adapted to that change and what lessons it holds for a planet now warming again. Everything about this research speaks to patience. The water beneath the ice has waited millions of years. The people studying it can afford to wait a few more. Each season brings new data, new technology, new insights. Step by slow step, the long sleep of ancient waters is being interrupted, not violently, but gently, respectfully. Scientists approach these lakes not as conquerors, but as listeners, trying to understand what the planet has been whispering beneath its frozen skin. Even with all our instruments, the image remains incomplete. No one has yet seen Lake Vostok directly. We've only inferred its properties through radar, magnetic readings, and the chemistry of refrozen samples. The day we finally peer into its depths will mark a turning point in our understanding of life and isolation. But even without that direct glimpse, the knowledge we've already gained changes everything. It shows that the planet's capacity for complexity doesn't stop where the ice begins. It continues downward into places that feel alien but are deeply connected to the story of life on Earth. The more we learn about these lakes, the more they seem less like exceptions and more like reminders. They tell us that life isn't confined to the comfortable or the visible. It exists wherever conditions allow, even if those conditions mean total darkness, pressure that could crush a submarine, and temperatures far below freezing. Life, it seems, has no need for our definition of habitability. It writes its own rules, quietly, patiently, in the dark. And somewhere, far below the endless white of Antarctica, it may still be doing just that. The water beneath the South Pole continues its long, slow circulation, untouched by the surface world. Microbes, if they exist there, go on dividing in silence, unaware of the scientists waiting above. The ice shifts, the rivers feed the lakes, and the ancient waters remain in their sleep, holding within them the memory of a planet that has changed 1,000 times while they have stayed the same. The story doesn't end there. Above those sleeping waters, above the pressure and the darkness, people continue to work, building cleaner drills, more precise instruments, and more daring missions. They're not just chasing knowledge, they're chasing connection, a deeper understanding of how life endures. Because if the long sleep of ancient waters can still hold traces of vitality, then perhaps nothing in this universe is ever truly lifeless. The patience of the planet becomes the patience of those who study it, and the quiet endurance of the ice becomes a lesson in perspective. What lies beneath Antarctica isn't just a scientific frontier, it's a reflection of persistence, both human and biological. The long sleep may continue, but with every discovery, the world above it grows a little more awake. And just as those buried waters remind us of life's endurance in the cold, they lead us onward to another question, the kind that draws people even deeper into the mystery. If life can survive in the darkest lakes on Earth, could it also exist in the places even colder, farther, and lonelier than these? That question begins to rise steady as a current, and it carries us naturally into what comes next. The idea that something could live in the coldest darkness on Earth feels strange at first. The mind instinctively associates life with warmth, with light, with the gentle pulse of sunlight feeding plants and the oxygen they give back. Yet the longer we look at the natural world, the clearer it becomes that life has never been confined to comfort. It exists in extremes, in silence, in pressure, in acid, in radiation. It endures in boiling vents on the ocean floor and frozen deserts where nothing should move. It hides in salt crystals older than civilization, and in that resilience lies one of the most astonishing truths of our planet. Wherever there is energy, no matter how faint, life finds a way to use it. Beneath Antarctica's vast ice, in lakes sealed off for millions of years, the conditions appear almost perfectly hostile. There is no sunlight, no oxygen-rich atmosphere, no influx of nutrients from the surface. The temperature remains below freezing, the pressure is immense, and the water contains more dissolved gases and salts than any typical environment. Yet these are not obstacles, they are challenges that life, if present, has adapted to overcome. The microorganisms that could inhabit such places wouldn't resemble the thriving forms we see above ground. They would be small, slow, and specialized, operating at a pace that matches the glacial rhythm of their surroundings. We already know that microbes on Earth can survive in ways that once seemed impossible. Scientists have recovered living bacteria from deep inside oceanic crust, kilometers below the seafloor, where the temperature and pressure mimic those found under Antarctica. Others have found tiny cells locked inside Arctic permafrost, revived after being frozen for tens of thousands of years. Even in nuclear reactors, species have evolved to repair their own DNA faster than radiation can destroy it. These discoveries reveal a universal pattern. Life does not need ideal conditions. It needs persistence and the ability to adapt. In Antarctica, researchers have begun to identify what kind of organisms could potentially exist beneath the ice. The most likely candidates are extremophiles, microbes that flourish in environments toxic or lethal to most other forms of life. Among them are psychrophiles, cold-loving organisms that grow best at temperatures below zero. These microbes produce special proteins that prevent their cells from freezing solid, keeping the water inside them in a delicate liquid state. Some use antifreeze-like molecules to stop ice crystals from forming, while others alter the composition of their cell membranes to remain flexible, even in extreme cold. The energy these organisms need doesn't come from sunlight. Instead, it's drawn from the chemistry of their surroundings. In deep-sea hydrothermal vents, microbes harness the energy released by volcanic minerals reacting with seawater. Beneath Antarctic ice, similar chemical processes could be at work on a slower, colder scale. Minerals in the bedrock release ions into the water, where they react with oxygen, nitrogen, or sulfur. Microbes that can use these reactions as fuel may have carved out small, stable niches of survival. The energy flow is minimal, but so are their needs. Some might divide only once every few years, conserving every molecule of energy like a slow heartbeat in the dark. Evidence for such possibilities doesn't come from imagination but from direct study of the planet's coldest environments. In the dry valleys of Antarctica, one of the most barren regions on Earth, scientists have discovered microbial colonies living inside rocks. These tiny communities survive on moisture that condenses from the air and energy captured from faint traces of sunlight filtering through the stone. If life can persist in exposed, frozen rock, it's not a stretch to believe it can do so beneath kilometers of insulating ice, where liquid water still moves. Further evidence came from the exploration of Lake Whillans, where researchers successfully drilled down through the ice without contamination. The samples they retrieved contained living cells, thousands of them in every milliliter of water. Analysis showed a variety of bacterial species, many unknown to science, each with adaptations for cold, dark environments. Some appeared to feed on nitrogen and sulfur compounds, while others used iron and methane. These organisms weren't dormant fossils from the past. They were metabolically active, alive and functioning in conditions once thought sterile. Their existence proves that even in the absence of sunlight, ecosystems can persist for thousands, perhaps millions, of years. What's striking about these microbes is how interconnected their survival appears to be. Each species depends on the waste products of another, forming a slow, circular economy of energy. One group might convert nitrogen into a usable form, which another then consumes and converts back into something else. Over time, these exchanges stabilize, creating a self-sustaining cycle that doesn't require external input. It's a miniature version of what happens in larger ecosystems, only reduced to the most efficient possible scale. Every molecule is recycled, every byproduct becomes food for something else. The existence of these communities forces scientists to reconsider the limits of habitability. The old assumption that life needs sunlight has already been dismantled by discoveries in the ocean depths. Now, with evidence from subglacial environments, another idea begins to shift, that life needs abundance. In truth, it may need only equilibrium, a balance between energy gained and energy spent, no matter how faint that balance may be. The slow pace of life in these regions is difficult for humans to grasp. On the surface, we measure time by movement, days, seasons, growth. But in the coldest shadows, time behaves differently. Chemical reactions slow down, metabolism crawls, and replication becomes rare. For the organisms living there, a single division might take years. Yet across geological time, that rhythm becomes sustainable. A microbe that divides once every century could still leave descendants stretching back millions of years. The system endures because it never wastes energy on anything unnecessary. It's the purest form of efficiency, life pared down to its simplest state, but still undeniably alive. Studying these microbes offers more than biological curiosity. It provides insight into how early life might have looked. Billions of years ago, before oxygen filled the atmosphere, Earth's surface was far less hospitable than it is today. The planet was bombarded by radiation, volcanoes, and meteors. Oceans were murky and acidic. In that environment, simple microbes found ways to survive in chemical gradients, just as they do beneath Antarctic ice now. In a sense, these modern extremophils are living fossils, echoes of Earth's earliest inhabitants. Understanding them is like reading the first pages of life's story written in molecular script. The tools used to study them are just as fascinating. Scientists can't simply scoop up samples and hope they survive. They must maintain the temperature, pressure, and chemical balance of the environment as closely as possible. A change of even a few degrees could kill delicate organisms adapted to such narrow conditions. Once the samples reach laboratories, researchers use genetic sequencing to identify what's there. Instead of looking for visible structures, they search for DNA fragments, chemical markers, and isotopic ratios that indicate biological activity. These techniques reveal patterns invisible to the eye but unmistakable in their meaning. The results, while still limited, suggest a remarkable diversity of microbial life. Many sequences recovered from Antarctic ice and water samples don't match any known organism. Some are distantly related to marine bacteria, suggesting that ancient seawater may have played a role in forming these lakes before the continent froze. Others are completely unique, hinting at long evolutionary separations. Each new sequence adds another branch to the tree of life, expanding its reach into environments once thought impossible. What's perhaps most humbling is that the total biomass of these hidden ecosystems could rival that of entire surface regions. Beneath Antarctica, beneath the ocean floors, beneath mountain ranges, microbial life exists in sheer numbers that are difficult to comprehend. The subsurface biosphere may account for the majority of Earth's microbial population, quietly influencing global chemistry without ever being seen. This vast hidden domain reminds us that what we consider the surface world is only one layer of a much larger living system. There's also a lesson here about resilience. Life in the coldest shadows doesn't fight against its environment, it adapts to it. It finds equilibrium instead of resistance. The microbes beneath the ice don't need warmth, they've evolved to function in its absence. They don't need light, they've replaced it with chemistry. Even death in these ecosystems takes on a different meaning. When a cell dies, its components are quickly reused by others, the cycle continuing seamlessly. Nothing is wasted, nothing lost. It's an entire philosophy of existence built on endurance and balance. Researchers studying these systems often describe a peculiar emotional response when they first realize what they're looking at. It's not the excitement of discovery exactly, but a kind of quiet awe. To peer into a sample of water from 2 kilometers beneath the ice and see signs of life is to be reminded that the universe is less empty than it appears. That feeling is especially profound when one considers how similar these environments are to those on other worlds. The icy moons of Jupiter and Saturn have conditions that mirror Antarctica's subglacial lakes almost perfectly. Thick ice above, rock below, liquid water trapped in between. If life can exist here, it stands to reason that it might exist there as well. That possibility has made Antarctica a training ground for astrobiologists. The techniques used to sample its subglacial lakes are prototypes for future missions to Europa or Enceladus. Clean drills, sealed sampling containers, and robotic probes that can operate autonomously in extreme conditions, all are being tested in the frozen continent's depths. What we learn here will guide how we search for life elsewhere. Each experiment beneath the Antarctic ice is, in a sense, a rehearsal for reaching other worlds. Even as we look outward, though, The significance of what's happening below our own planet's ice shouldn't be underestimated. The existence of life in such conditions changes how we see Earth itself. It's no longer a world divided neatly between habitable and uninhabitable zones. It's a layered organism, alive from its surface to its core. The deep biosphere connects with the shallow one through slow exchanges of water, gas, and minerals. Over geological timescales, these interactions shape everything, from ocean chemistry to climate. In that sense, the coldest shadows beneath Antarctica are not isolated at all. They're part of the same global network that sustains forests, oceans, and atmosphere. They remind us that the definition of alive extends far beyond what we see. Even the smallest organism in the darkest lake contributes, however slowly, to the balance of the whole. The knowledge we gain from studying them also offers perspective on our own fragility. Humanity depends on narrow environmental conditions, temperature, air composition, sunlight. The microbes in the dark do not. They would continue long after the surface changed. In their slow persistence lies a kind of immortality, not in individuals but in continuity. They endure because they need so little. In a world increasingly defined by its instability, that endurance feels almost like wisdom. The scientists who dedicate their careers to studying this hidden life understand the gravity of their work. Each sample they collect carries the weight of time. Each DNA sequence adds another thread to the web of understanding that connects Earth to its cosmic possibilities. The work is slow, sometimes frustrating, often dangerous, but deeply meaningful. They are, in a way, ambassadors between worlds, the familiar one above and the alien one below. It's still uncertain just how complex these ecosystems are. They might be limited to microbes, or they might include larger, multicellular forms adapted to the same conditions. No one knows for sure, and the ice keeps its secrets well. What's certain is that the presence of life there, no matter how simple, challenges every assumption we once had about where life can exist. It shows that biology is not a fragile phenomenon clinging to rare circumstances, but a natural expression of chemistry given enough time. And so, the coldest shadows continue to live, unseen but enduring. Each droplet of water beneath the ice might contain 1,000 cells, each cell a story billions of years in the making. They drift through the dark, consuming, dividing and continuing, indifferent to whether anyone knows they exist. They don't need recognition. Their purpose is simply to persist. Above them, the glaciers move slowly toward the sea, their pace determined in part by the very water and microbes that live beneath. The connection between life and ice is deeper than we once imagined. The same processes that sustain these hidden organisms also influence how the ice flows, how it melts, and how it shapes the planet's future. The boundaries between biology and geology blur, merging into one continuous system of change. The story of life in the coldest shadows isn't a conclusion, it's an introduction to something larger. The same principles that govern survival here may hold true beyond our world. The adaptations that allow these microbes to live in near-freezing water might be universal strategies. Understanding them could teach us what to look for when we search for life elsewhere. It could also remind us of something simple but profound. Life, in all its forms, is not an exception. It's a pattern. And just as these tiny organisms continue their patient existence in the dark, our curiosity moves with the same persistence. We keep searching, drilling, observing, because each answer leads to another question. If these small, unseen creatures can thrive beneath the ice of our own planet, then what might exist under the crust of another? What might stir in oceans that never see light, orbiting worlds far from the warmth of the sun? That question drifts quietly upward, as steady as the slow currents beneath the ice, carrying us toward the next layer of understanding waiting to be uncovered. It's impossible to think about life beneath the Antarctic ice without wondering what it might mean beyond Earth. Every discovery in those frozen depths seems to echo outward into the cosmos, whispering of distant worlds that could hold the same secrets in silence. The connection is not poetic, it's scientific, grounded in chemistry, physics, and the quiet consistency of natural laws. The more we learn about the conditions under the South Pole, the more they resemble places far from here, moons orbiting gas giants, planets encased in ice, and perhaps even the hidden oceans of worlds we haven't yet found. It's as if the Earth, in its most remote corner, is showing us a reflection of what may lie scattered throughout the universe. When researchers study Antarctica's subglacial lakes, they're not just investigating a local mystery. They're testing the boundaries of biology itself. The pressure, the darkness, the isolation, these are the same conditions thought to exist on Europa, the icy moon of Jupiter, and Enceladus, one of Saturn's smallest but most intriguing satellites. Both have surfaces made of solid ice and evidence of liquid water beneath. Both emit plumes of vapour that hint at hidden oceans. Both, like the Antarctic lakes, are shielded from sunlight but sustained by the energy that rises from within. If microbial life can persist under Earth's ice, then maybe it's not alone in the solar system. The parallels are striking. Europa's crust is estimated to be around 20 kilometres thick, beneath which lies an ocean containing more water than all of Earth's seas combined. The temperature there is far below freezing, but the moon's interior stays warm due to tidal forces, gravitational stretching caused by Jupiter's immense pull. The result is a global ocean of liquid water, moving and mixing in the dark. It's the same balance of pressure and heat that keeps Antarctica's lakes from freezing solid. On Enceladus, similar forces are at work. The moon's icy surface is scarred with fractures that vent plumes of water vapour into space. Spacecraft passing through those plumes have detected salts, organic molecules, and complex chemistry, all ingredients that could, under the right conditions, sustain life. This resemblance between distant moons and Earth's frozen south isn't just coincidence. It reveals a deeper truth about how planets and moons evolve. Ice and rock interact in predictable ways, creating energy gradients that life could exploit. It's the same story repeated across scales. Wherever water and energy meet, biology might follow. The study of Antarctica, then, becomes a model for astrobiology, a way to understand how life might arise and persist in places we can't yet reach. Every sample drawn from under the South Pole becomes a stand-in for samples we hope one day to take from alien oceans. That's why so many scientists describe Antarctica as an analogue for extraterrestrial environments. The drills, the sensors, the sterilization techniques, they're all designed not only to study Earth's subglacial ecosystems, but to prepare for missions beyond it. When engineers test a new robotic probe in Antarctica's frozen waters, they're rehearsing for the day it might descend through the ice of Europa. The same problems, contamination, communication, and energy management, apply equally on both worlds. What we learn here will determine how carefully we can explore there. It's fascinating to think that the path to discovering alien life may pass through one of the most desolate regions of our own planet. In a way, the Antarctic ice is a bridge between worlds, connecting our understanding of Earth's resilience with the possibilities that exist beyond the reach of sunlight. When scientists peer into that darkness, they're not just studying microbes, they're listening for a pattern, a rhythm that might repeat elsewhere. Even the chemical signatures found in subglacial lakes hint at processes that could be universal. For example, the interaction between rock and water can produce hydrogen gas, a simple molecule that many microbes use as fuel. The same reaction occurs when ocean water meets volcanic rock at deep-sea vents. It also likely happens beneath the crusts of icy moons, where tidal heating keeps the interiors warm enough for water to circulate. Hydrogen, along with carbon compounds, forms the basic scaffolding of life's metabolism. Where it exists in abundance, it's reasonable to suspect that biology might too. One of the reasons these connections feel so profound is because they reframe what we mean by alien. The word often conjures images of something completely other, unrecognizable, disconnected from anything familiar. But when we examine the chemistry of life, the line between alien and earthly begins to blur. Life, no matter where it forms, will always be bound by the same physical laws. It will always need a way to store energy, to replicate, to repair. It might look different, use different molecules, or live at different scales, but its foundation will be recognizable. The life that could exist beneath the South Pole is alien in its own way, already showing us that the boundaries of biology stretch further than we imagined. The search for extraterrestrial life has long focused on extremes because that's where the rules of survival are tested most harshly. On Mars, researchers look for evidence of ancient rivers and underground ice. On Titan, they imagine chemistry based not on water, but on methane. Yet even in those places, the logic is consistent. Where there's stability and a source of energy, there's potential. Antarctica offers a working example of that principle. It proves that life doesn't require the surface. It can thrive in isolation, drawing strength from chemical and thermal gradients. This realization has transformed how space agencies plan future missions. Instead of searching for life directly on a planet's surface, scientists now look beneath it. Instruments are designed to detect traces of subsurface water, measure chemical imbalances, and identify molecules that could indicate biological activity. The technology used to probe Antarctica's hidden lakes, clean drills, autonomous sensors, sealed sample collectors, are prototypes for the ones that will one day travel across the solar system. The first explorers of alien oceans, in a sense, are already working on Earth, their laboratories covered in ice instead of stars. There's something poetic in that symmetry. The coldest, most remote place on our planet becomes a stand-in for worlds beyond. The frozen desert at the bottom of Earth becomes a window into the potential of life across the galaxy. It's as though the planet is teaching us through repetition, showing that the story of survival doesn't belong to one world alone. What's even more interesting is that some scientists believe life might have first emerged in conditions similar to these. Early Earth was not a comfortable place. Its surface was bombarded by meteorites, its atmosphere choked with carbon dioxide, and its oceans likely covered in ice. Beneath that ice, however, hydrothermal activity may have created warm, stable environments shielded from the chaos above. In those protected waters, simple molecules could assemble, react, and evolve. The microbes that exist beneath Antarctica today might be distant descendants of those first forms of life, or at least living analogues that show us how it was possible. When viewed through that lens, the subglacial lakes are not just laboratories for astrobiology, but for origins research as well. They may contain the same ingredients and energy flows that first gave rise to metabolism. The isolation of those lakes, their long stillness, and their chemical self-sufficiency all make them time capsules of possibility. Studying them might not only tell us where life can exist, but also how it begins. It's remarkable how exploration at the limits of our own planet can make the universe feel smaller. When the first samples from Lake Whillans revealed living bacteria, the implications rippled far beyond Earth. Suddenly, the question of whether other worlds could harbour life felt less hypothetical. If microbes can live without sunlight beneath Antarctica, then perhaps they can do the same beneath Europa's crust, or within the warm fissures of Enceladus. The discovery didn't prove that alien life exists, but it made the argument that it could much more credible. Each new piece of evidence from Antarctica adds another layer to this quiet dialogue between Earth and the cosmos. The isotopes in the water tell us how long it's been isolated. The minerals reveal the chemistry of the bedrock. The microorganisms, if present, show us the range of life's adaptability. Together they form a narrative that stretches outward from the South Pole to the outer planets, a story of persistence, endurance, and possibility. It's easy to forget that these connections depend on observation and patience. Every new measurement, every carefully filtered sample, requires years of planning and the combined effort of scientists from around the world. Antarctica forces collaboration by necessity. No one can survive there alone, and no single nation can claim its discoveries. The international nature of this research mirrors the shared curiosity that drives humanity's exploration of space. Beneath the ice, borders disappear. The work becomes a collective endeavour, a reminder that some questions are too large for anyone to own. There's also a philosophical depth to the idea that the first alien life we discover might not be found among the stars but beneath our own planet's surface. If we find microbes in Antarctica that have evolved entirely apart from the surface biosphere, they would represent a form of life that is, in every sense, alien. Not because it comes from elsewhere, but because it evolved independently, shaped by a completely different set of pressures. Such a discovery would redefine what we mean by alien life. It would mean that the universe doesn't need to create life multiple times across space for diversity to exist. It can do so right here, within a single world. That possibility is not just theoretical. Some researchers have proposed that if subglacial lakes have been sealed long enough, any organisms inside could have diverged from their surface relatives millions of years ago. They would represent an evolutionary branch cut off before the appearance of complex animals, continuing their own lineage in isolation. Their DNA could hold records of early biological chemistry, preserved in a natural vault beneath the ice. Finding them would be like discovering a living fossil, a direct line to the beginnings of life itself. Even without direct contact, studying the signals from these environments provides valuable clues. Instruments capable of detecting methane, carbon dioxide, and other metabolic byproducts can reveal whether something biological might be happening below. It's the same approach used to analyse the atmospheres of distant planets. When telescopes detect unexpected gas ratios around other worlds, like too much oxygen or methane, it often sparks speculation about life. On Earth, those same gases escaping through cracks in the ice can hint at activity below. In that way, Antarctica becomes a natural training ground for interpreting signals from far away. There's a growing sense among scientists that understanding life under Antarctica's ice could unlock the key to recognizing it elsewhere. The same biochemical patterns, the same ratios of gases or isotopes could serve as a universal signature. By studying the hidden ecosystems of our own planet, we're teaching ourselves how to listen for those whispers of life beyond. What's perhaps most beautiful about this line of research is that it replaces speculation with evidence, and wonder with understanding. Instead of imagining alien worlds as pure fantasy, we can now ground our hopes in measurable reality. The alien within the Antarctic ice is not a creature of imagination. It's a process, a pattern of resilience that transcends the specifics of any single world. It shows that the universe is not indifferent to life. Given time, energy, and stability, life is what matter does when it can. The next step is inevitable. As technology advances, probes will go deeper, sensors will become more precise, and our ability to explore will expand. The clean drills perfected in Antarctica will one day pierce the crust of Europa or the geysers of Enceladus. The data they send back will be compared to what we've learned here. And when we finally detect something unmistakably alive beyond Earth, whether a molecule, a microbe, or something more complex, it will feel familiar, because long before we found it out there, we met it here, sleeping quietly under the ice, reminding us that alien and earthly were never truly separate. That realization doesn't end the mystery, it deepens it. It invites new questions about connection, about how life spreads, and whether the same spark that began here might exist everywhere. Some scientists even wonder whether life on Earth and life elsewhere share a common origin, carried by asteroids scattered through space, seeded across worlds like spores on the wind. If that's true, then the life beneath Antarctica's ice isn't just a local phenomenon, it's part of a cosmic lineage, one that ties us to every possible living thing in the universe. These ideas may sound vast, but they all begin in the same quiet place, a frozen continent at the bottom of the world, where scientists listen to the whispers rising from the ice. Each borehole, each radar echo, each droplet of ancient water is a message. Not from aliens, but from the conditions that make them possible. The whisper of the alien within is not a warning or a fantasy. It's a reminder that the line between here and elsewhere is thinner than we think. The same processes that make our planet alive could be playing out in countless hidden corners of the cosmos, waiting for someone to notice. The work continues, patient and precise. Teams endure months of darkness, isolation and cold, driven by the belief that beneath the ice lies more than water and sediment. They know that the story of life isn't confined to one planet. It's a story of chemistry, endurance, and the quiet insistence of existence itself. The whispers beneath the South Pole are the same whispers that echo across space. The universe asking the same question it has always asked. What else might live, and where might we find it next? And as that question lingers in the stillness of the Antarctic night, the search continues upward and outward, toward other frozen oceans and other silent worlds where something might be stirring even now, waiting for light it will never see, moving slowly beneath a surface that no one has yet touched. The search for what lies beneath Antarctica's ice has never been just about discovery. It's also a story about persistence, the kind that spans decades, even lifetimes. Every generation of scientists that sets foot on that frozen continent inherits a dream older than most of them were alive to see fulfilled. To reach the untouched water beneath the ice, to hold a sample that hasn't seen the surface in millions of years, to look for signs of life where light does not reach. It's the kind of pursuit that requires faith as much as science. The odds are high, the logistics immense, the dangers constant, and yet they keep going. The reality of drilling through the Antarctic ice is far removed from the romantic idea of exploration. There's nothing glamorous about it. It's not a moment of sudden revelation, but a process of careful repetition, carried out in temperatures that can kill in minutes. The air at the surface burns with cold, and the ice itself is dense enough to crush metal if the equipment fails. The isolation is total. Even radio signals bounce strangely in the dry air, and when storms roll in, the entire camp becomes a single flickering dot of light surrounded by white nothingness. And still, beneath all that, the scientists dream of what lies below. The logistics alone are staggering. Drilling through 3 or 4 kilometers of ice takes years of planning. Every component of the machinery must be designed to survive the cold. Every screw, seal, and cable must function flawlessly, because repairs in that environment are nearly impossible. Power is scarce, transport limited, and each piece of equipment must be flown in piece by piece. The teams live in small, insulated modules that hum with generators, their interiors filled with the scent of fuel and melted snow. The walls shake when the wind howls. For months, daylight never fades, and for other months it never returns. The human body learns to adapt to the rhythm of work rather than the rhythm of time. At the heart of these operations lies the drill, a machine that has become the embodiment of persistence itself. It doesn't carve through rock or soil, but through ancient ice that has been compacting since before the dawn of human history. The earliest attempts to reach deep subglacial lakes used mechanical drills, but the risk of contamination was too high. The oil-based fluids needed to keep them from freezing could introduce chemicals or microorganisms from the surface. Over time, new techniques emerged. The most promising of them is the hot water drill, a system that melts a narrow column through the ice using water heated to near boiling, filtered and sterilized to ensure nothing foreign enters the environment below. This process is delicate. As the hot water nozzle moves downward, it must maintain just the right balance of temperature and pressure. Too much heat, and the tunnel collapses. Too little, and the water freezes before the drill can descend. The melted water is pumped back to the surface, filtered and reheated to continue the cycle. It's a continuous exchange, a dance between physics and engineering that must proceed without error for days on end. Once the borehole reaches the desired depth, it's fitted with sensors, cameras and sampling devices, each sterilized to levels usually reserved for spacecraft, before being lowered into the darkness below. That last step, the moment when the probe passes through the final meters of ice and touches liquid water for the first time, is one that no one forgets. There's no dramatic sound, no sudden light, just a subtle change in pressure, a reading on a monitor that confirms contact. After years of effort, the moment comes quietly, as though the ice allows entry only with humility. The team above doesn't celebrate loudly. They know that even a single misstep could ruin everything. Contamination, miscalibration, or equipment failure could mean the loss of a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. So they watch their instruments and wait for data to rise from the depths. Each mission is more than a technical achievement, it's a moral one. The Antarctic Treaty and subsequent environmental protocols impose strict rules on exploration to protect the continent's purity. Any operation that risks introducing modern life to these isolated ecosystems must demonstrate that it will leave no trace. Scientists work under the principle that they are visitors, not conquerors. The lakes below are not resources to exploit, but environments to understand. The mantra is always the same: take only what's needed, disturb as little as possible, and leave the ice as untouched as it was found. For many who work on these projects, that responsibility is personal. They understand that they're not just studying a natural system, but interacting with one of the last places on Earth untouched by human presence. Some of them describe the experience in terms of reverence, as though the ice itself demands respect. It's easy to understand why. The scale of it overwhelms every sense. The landscape stretches to the horizon without change. The silence presses against the ears like a physical weight. The air, so dry it freezes breath, feels otherworldly. Standing on the surface, knowing what lies miles below, produces a kind of quiet awe that no photograph can capture. The dream of reaching those buried lakes goes back more than half a century. When Soviet scientists discovered Lake Vostok beneath the ice in the 1990s using radar and seismic data, it captured the imagination of researchers worldwide. The idea that an entire body of water, the size of a great lake, had been sealed away for millions of years felt almost mythic. Teams from different countries began to develop plans to reach it, but everyone understood the stakes. One mistake could destroy a pristine ecosystem and contaminate one of the planet's most precious scientific sites. It wasn't until 2012 that the first borehole finally reached the water after decades of engineering and debate. The moment was both triumph and controversy. The method used, a pressurized drill lubricated with kerosene and freon, was criticized for its potential to contaminate the sample. The Russian team insisted they had taken every precaution, and the water that refroze and rose up through the borehole was collected for study. The results were ambiguous. Some analyses found unusual microbial DNA. Others detected traces of contamination. Still, it was a milestone. Humanity had, for the first time, made contact with a lake sealed beneath the ice for over 15 million years. The debate about what that meant continues, but the achievement itself changed what was possible. Since then, cleaner and more precise technologies have taken over. The British Antarctic Survey attempted to reach Lake Ellsworth in 2012 using a clean hot water drill but had to abort the mission after technical problems. The experience, though disappointing, provided valuable lessons that shaped future efforts. 2 years later, the Whillans Ice Stream Subglacial Access Research Drilling Project succeeded in penetrating a smaller, shallower lake using a fully sterile system. That mission retrieved living microbes, showing that life could persist in such extreme conditions. Each step forward refines the process, bringing us closer to the larger and deeper lakes that still wait in silence. What makes these projects so compelling isn't only the science, but the human story behind them. The researchers spend months preparing equipment, calibrating sensors, and living in cramped conditions with little contact with the outside world. They eat dehydrated meals, sleep in narrow bunks, and wake each day to temperatures colder than dry ice. Yet when they speak about their work, their words carry a quiet enthusiasm that borders on devotion. They know they might never see the full outcome of their efforts. The data collected could take years to analyse, and the discoveries may come long after they've left the ice. Still, they return. Because for them, the idea of touching something so old, so untouched, outweighs everything else. It's not hard to understand that motivation. The act of drilling into the unknown has always carried symbolic weight. Humans have looked upward at the stars for centuries, but downward holds its own kind of wonder. The ice beneath Antarctica isn't just a barrier. It's a record of time. Each layer contains traces of atmosphere, dust, and life from different eras. To drill through it is to move backward through history, through epochs of climate and change, until reaching the boundary where ice meets liquid. Crossing that line is like touching the edge of another world. The instruments used in these missions are feats of engineering. Sensors capable of measuring pressure, temperature, and conductivity operate in near-freezing water without malfunctioning. Cameras designed for darkness capture faint images of sediments and bubbles, sending them back to the surface through fibre optic cables. Robotic samplers collect water and soil, sealing them in sterile containers for transport. Even the cables themselves must resist freezing, tension, and contamination. Every piece of the system must work perfectly, because once deployed, retrieval is nearly impossible. Each success inspires new ambitions. Plans are already in motion to send autonomous vehicles into the subglacial lakes, small robotic explorers capable of navigating through water under ice. These machines will carry instruments that can test for chemical signatures of life, map the terrain, and capture high-resolution images. Some designs even mimic space probes, running on low power for long durations and transmitting data through tethered cables. The hope is that they can operate without disturbing the environment, gliding through the water like cautious visitors, recording everything without leaving a trace. These machines represent the culmination of decades of dreamers who believed that the mysteries of the deep could be reached through patience and precision. They also represent the future of exploration beyond Earth. The same technologies that let us reach a hidden lake beneath Antarctica will one day allow us to pierce the icy shells of other worlds. The robotic explorers descending into Europa's ocean or Enceladus's geysers will be the descendants of the ones tested here. The connection between drilling through Antarctic ice and searching for alien life is direct, practical, and profound. The dream of reaching those hidden worlds doesn't belong only to scientists. It's part of something larger, a human instinct to seek what lies beyond the known. The drilling projects under the South Pole are expressions of that instinct, made tangible through technology and teamwork. Every metre of progress represents thousands of hours of calculation, testing, and perseverance. Each successful descent into the unknown stands as proof that curiosity is stronger than fear, and that knowledge can come from even the most inhospitable corners of the earth. At the same time, these efforts remind us of the fragility of what we're studying. The lakes beneath the ice are not infinite resources. They're isolated pockets of water, each with its own delicate balance of chemistry and pressure. A single contaminated sample could alter that balance irreversibly. That's why the scientists treat each expedition as a privilege, not an entitlement. They understand that they're guests in a system that predates humanity itself. In the end, the dream of drilling isn't just about reaching water. It's about reaching understanding. It's about listening to what the planet has kept hidden, learning from it, and ensuring that knowledge is passed forward. The ice will likely remain long after our machines have stopped working. The lakes will continue their quiet cycles. But for a brief moment we have the chance to glimpse them, to record their story, to recognise the living processes unfolding in the dark. The work continues, season after season, each team building on the last. They refine their methods, improve their instruments, and push deeper into the unknown. They work not for fame or reward, but because they understand the value of patience. Beneath the noise of the modern world, they pursue something quieter and older, the act of uncovering truth through persistence. The dream is not just scientific, it's human. It's the same dream that built observatories on mountains, sent spacecraft to the outer planets, and now sends drills through the coldest ice on Earth. And somewhere below that ice, in the stillness where no sunlight has ever reached, something ancient waits. Perhaps it's only water and stone. Perhaps it's something alive. Whatever it is, it's part of the same story that began billions of years ago when the first cells learned to survive in darkness. The great drilling dreams are our way of continuing that story, of extending curiosity into places that seem unreachable, of proving that even under the heaviest ice, the desire to know still burns steadily. As the equipment hums and the drills descend, as the generators thrum in the distance and the researchers huddle over their screens, that dream moves closer to reality. The data flows upward, bit by bit, like whispers through miles of frozen silence. And though the work will take years to interpret, everyone involved understands that something significant is happening. The ice is giving up its secrets slowly and carefully to those patient enough to listen. The next challenge will go beyond drilling. It will mean entering those hidden worlds directly, sending machines to swim through their depths and touch their sediments. It will mean seeing, for the first time, the landscape of a lake that has never known light. It will mean asking, finally, the question that has driven all of this effort. What does it mean to find life where none was expected? The answer, whatever it turns out to be, will carry forward into the next journey, the one that leaves this planet altogether and looks outward to the frozen oceans that orbit distant suns. Among the hundreds of hidden lakes beneath Antarctica, one has always stood apart, both for its size and for the mystery surrounding it. Deep below the surface of the eastern ice sheet lies a body of water so vast that it dwarfs almost every other lake on the continent. It has been sealed off from the rest of the world for millions of years, locked in isolation under nearly 4 kilometers of ice. Its name is Lake Vostok, and in many ways it is the beating heart of Antarctica's greatest enigma, a world within a world preserved in silence, waiting for someone to understand it. To imagine the scale of Lake Vostok, it helps to think of a hidden ocean rather than a lake. It stretches more than 250 kilometers in length and up to 80 kilometers wide, covering an area similar to that of Lake Ontario. Its waters reach depths of over 1,000 meters, enough to drown skyscrapers, enough to sustain pressure greater than any human has felt outside of the deep sea. The surface of the lake lies 2 miles below the snow, but its shoreline follows the shape of the mountains buried beneath the ice. Those mountains, now crushed under ancient weight, once stood tall when Antarctica was warm, before glaciers spread across it like a slow tide of time. When the Soviet team first detected the lake in the 1990s, it wasn't through sight, but through sound. Seismic readings and radar reflections revealed an anomaly, an expanse of flat, smooth echoes inconsistent with solid ice or rock. At first, the data seemed almost too uniform, too perfect, as if the instruments were malfunctioning. But repeated surveys confirmed it. What they were seeing was a layer of liquid water, larger and deeper than anyone imagined could exist beneath so much ice. The realization was staggering. A whole ecosystem potentially untouched since before humans existed, preserved like a natural time capsule under unimaginable pressure. Every fact we've learned about Lake Vostok since then has only deepened its mystery. The ice that lies directly above it isn't the same as the layers above. It's clear, glassy, and formed from water that refroze as it rose from the lake. Scientists call it accretion ice, and it's the closest thing we have to a sample from the lake itself. Studying it has revealed hints of salts, organic molecules, and even fragments of DNA. Each of these findings opens a door to new questions. What processes are happening down there? What chemical reactions sustain that water's balance? And could something be living in it, quietly persisting beyond the reach of light? The conditions within Lake Vostok are extreme by any measure. The temperature hovers around -3 degrees Celsius, kept from freezing solid only by the immense pressure above and by geothermal heat below. The oxygen concentration is unusually high, 50 times that of a typical surface lake, produced by the slow dissolution of air trapped in the ice above as it melts. That much oxygen would be toxic to most known life forms, yet extremophiles on Earth have shown time and again that where there is challenge, there is adaptation. Microbes have been found thriving in high oxygen, high pressure environments before, using enzymes and membranes that neutralize the very conditions that would destroy other organisms. For scientists, Lake Vostok represents more than just a geological curiosity. It's a potential mirror of early Earth, and perhaps even a model for life elsewhere in the solar system. The water chemistry, the lack of sunlight, the mineral interactions at its base, all of it resembles the conditions believed to exist beneath the icy crusts of Europa and Enceladus. Studying Vostok might not only reveal how life survives under such constraints, but how it begins. If microbes are living there, cut off for millions of years, then evolution has continued in a sealed experiment of nature's design. Their biology could show us pathways of adaptation we've never seen, even genetic codes that differ slightly from known life on the surface. The attempt to reach this hidden world has been one of the most ambitious and controversial efforts in modern science. For decades, the Russian Antarctic expedition at Vostok Station pursued the goal of drilling into the lake, navigating a maze of technical and ethical challenges. The surface station, perched above the buried lake, sits in one of the coldest places on Earth. Temperatures there routinely drop below -70 degrees Celsius. The atmosphere is so dry that moisture freezes instantly, and the horizon is an unbroken field of white stretching endlessly in every direction. The people who live and work there must contend not only with the cold, but with the psychological effects of isolation, darkness, and monotony. Yet they persist, driven by the dream of reaching what no one has touched before. In 2012, after more than 20 years of drilling, the Russian team finally broke through. The event was both a triumph and a cautionary tale. The technique used, a mechanical drill lubricated with kerosene and freon, was chosen to prevent the borehole from freezing shut, but it carried the risk of contaminating the lake below. When the drill reached the water, the immense pressure caused it to surge upward, filling the borehole with lake water that quickly refroze. That refrozen material, retrieved months later, was the first tangible connection between humanity and the lake's interior. The samples were analysed carefully, and the findings were mixed. Some laboratories detected signs of microbial life, DNA sequences that didn't match known species. Others concluded that these sequences likely came from surface contamination. The debate remains unresolved, but the event changed the course of polar research forever. Despite the controversy, the breakthrough at Vostok proved that reaching subglacial lakes was possible. It showed that the engineering challenges could be overcome, even in the harshest environment on Earth. It also forced scientists to confront the ethical limits of exploration. How do you study something without changing it? How do you observe a pristine ecosystem without corrupting the very data you seek? Those questions now guide every new mission beneath the ice, shaping the technologies of the next generation. The structure of Lake Vostok itself continues to fascinate geophysicists. Its floor is uneven, divided by ridges and basins, suggesting that it may consist of multiple interconnected chambers rather than one uniform body of water. Some of these chambers lie close to geothermal vents, where heat from the Earth's interior seeps through the crust, creating potential oases of warmth and chemical energy. Others are cold, still, and dense with sediment. The interaction between these zones could generate circulation within the lake, allowing nutrients and minerals to move slowly through the system. This circulation, however faint, could sustain microbial communities if they exist, distributing energy just enough to maintain equilibrium over long timescales. Even without direct samples, scientists can infer much from the ice above. The radar profiles reveal boundaries where the density changes, marking layers of ice that refroze from the lake over time. Each layer represents an event, perhaps a rise in temperature, a shift in pressure, or an earthquake that fractured the base of the ice. These traces act like geological signatures, silent witnesses to the lake's evolution. By analysing isotopes and trapped gases, researchers can reconstruct the temperature history, the rate of melting, and even the possible age of the water. The numbers are staggering. Estimates suggest that the water in Lake Vostok has been isolated for 15 to 20 million years, flowing and circulating beneath the ice since long before humans evolved. In that span of time, entire lineages of life on the surface have appeared and vanished. Forests have grown and disappeared beneath glaciers. Oceans have shifted their currents. Species that once roamed Antarctica have left fossils embedded in stone now buried under ice. Yet Lake Vostok has remained constant, its ecosystem, if it exists, evolving in ways we can only imagine. Some researchers speculate that if life is present, it could represent ancient microbial forms preserved from a time when Antarctica was warm and covered in lakes and vegetation. If so, the lake may be a living memory of a world long gone, maintaining continuity where the surface did not. For the scientists studying it, the emotional weight of this knowledge is hard to describe. They know they are looking at something that predates human history, something that has persisted through every change the planet has endured. They also know how fragile that balance is. A single act of carelessness could introduce modern microbes that outcompete or destroy whatever has survived there. That awareness creates a strange combination of wonder and restraint, a desire to see and an obligation not to harm. It's science at its most careful and its most human. Even as the debate over the 2012 samples continues, new missions are being planned. The next generation of drills will rely entirely on clean hot water systems, sterilised with ultraviolet light and filters finer than any used before. Autonomous probes are being designed to navigate through the melted water channels and collect data without human presence. They'll measure pH, salinity and chemical gradients, searching for signs of metabolism. They'll capture samples that can be sealed instantly to prevent contamination. Each of these instruments carries a part of the same dream, the dream of seeing the unseen, of revealing the landscape of a hidden ocean beneath a continent of ice. If the probes ever reach Lake Vostok's main basin, they might find a world unlike any other on Earth. The bottom could be covered with fine sediment, the remnants of ancient rocks ground down by glaciers before the lake was sealed. Hydrothermal vents might punctuate the floor, releasing minerals and heat that rise in plumes, creating microclimates in the dark. Chemical reactions between water and rock could provide the nutrients necessary for microbial life. Tiny particles might drift slowly in the current, reflecting the faint light of instruments as they fall through the cold water. The silence would be absolute, yet the place would not be dead. That vision drives everything. The long hours, the frozen fingers, the sleepless nights in the research stations. It's the vision of uncovering a fragment of Earth that has remained untouched since before humanity began to measure time. To stand at the edge of that discovery is to feel the scale of the planet not as a scientist, but as a participant in something ancient. The ice above Lake Vostok isn't just a barrier, it's a membrane separating two realities, the world of light, air and change, and the world of stillness, pressure and endurance. To break through it is to bridge that divide, if only for a moment. Some researchers describe Lake Vostok as Earth's last great wilderness, not because of its size, but because of its purity. It's a place where natural processes have continued undisturbed, where the chemistry of the water might resemble that of the planet's early oceans. Studying it could reveal how ecosystems function when stripped to their simplest elements. It could show us how life organises itself without sunlight, without seasons, without contact with the wider biosphere. In that sense, Lake Vostok is not only a scientific target, but a philosophical one, a test of how deeply we're willing to understand life as it truly is, rather than as we wish it to be, the story of Vostok continues to evolve with each new data set, each refinement in radar imaging, each core sample that reaches the laboratories thousands of kilometers away. The lake itself remains unseen, its secrets intact, but its influence extends far beyond the ice. It has reshaped how scientists think about isolation, evolution, and resilience. It has inspired engineers to build machines capable of surviving the harshest environments imaginable. It has connected the coldest point on Earth to the outer reaches of the solar system in a single thread of logic and curiosity. And beneath all that, beneath the calculations and protocols and debates, lies something simple, a sense of wonder. It's the same feeling that led explorers across oceans and scientists to peer into microscopes for the first time. The belief that the unknown is worth pursuing, not because it promises reward, but because it exists. Lake Vostok embodies that belief completely. It's the silent reminder that there are still places left on this planet where mystery outweighs knowledge, where patience is the only way forward, and where discovery, when it comes, will not belong to one person or nation, but to everyone who has ever looked at the frozen horizon and wondered what lies beneath. And as the ice above continues to shift, compressing and refreezing, the lake endures. The pressure remains constant. The currents move slowly in the dark. Perhaps something stirs down there, invisible and ancient. Perhaps the water itself carries the memory of life, suspended but not gone. Whatever waits below, it remains untouched for now, a secret held tightly by the cold, as if the planet itself is guarding one of its oldest truths until we are ready to understand it. The research continues, the instruments evolve, and the people who dedicate their lives to this work keep returning to the ice. They know that the real significance of Lake Vostok lies not just in what it may reveal, but in what it represents. The possibility that even in the most unlikely conditions, life and curiosity persist. The secret heart of that hidden lake beats quietly, waiting, as the world above it continues to listen. When the first samples of ice drawn from above Lake Vostok were brought to the surface, they were not crystal clear windows into the unknown. They were cloudy, coarse, and filled with minute particles that seemed ordinary at first glance. But under microscopes, in sterile laboratories far from the frozen plateau, they began to tell a story, one written not in words but in the faint residues of ancient life. The scientists who studied them were cautious, even skeptical, but they couldn't help feeling the weight of what they might be seeing. Inside those frozen fragments, preserved by time and pressure, lay what could be messages from the past, carried upward through the ice, waiting patiently to be read. Microbes are the planet's most persistent storytellers. They leave traces everywhere, fossilized, mineralized, trapped in crystals or frozen into glaciers that span ages. In Antarctica, they've been found in layers of ice hundreds of thousands of years old, their genetic material still intact enough to sequence. Most of them are familiar species, wind-blown bacteria that settled on the surface before being buried by snowfall. But some, found deep within the accretion ice near Lake Vostok, appear different. Their DNA doesn't match any known organism on record. Whether they are contaminants, mutations, or truly unique lineages is a question still being tested. Yet even the possibility that they might be native to the lake, a separate branch of evolution sealed away for millions of years, is enough to change how we think about life's endurance. The first hints came in 2013, when Russian scientists published results from the refrozen water collected after their drill reached the lake. Among the chemical data and gas measurements, they reported sequences of microbial DNA. Out of more than 3,000 identified genetic fragments, a handful didn't match any known species. Some were close to familiar families of bacteria, others were more distant, suggesting entirely new forms. The announcement sparked immediate debate. Many argued the samples were too easily contaminated by drilling fluids and surface exposure. Others countered that the data, though incomplete, were consistent with life that had evolved in isolation. The argument hasn't ended, and perhaps it never will until a truly uncontaminated sample reaches the laboratories. But regardless of the outcome, the message was clear. Something down there was chemically active, and the water beneath the ice was far from inert. To understand what these microbial traces represent, it helps to consider what survival means in such an environment. The temperatures are near freezing, the pressure immense, and the nutrients scarce. There is no sunlight to drive photosynthesis, no constant supply of organic matter. Yet even under those conditions, energy still flows, though faintly. Chemical gradients between the lake water and the sediments below create potential sources of energy. Minerals leach from the bedrock, iron, manganese, sulfur, and react with dissolved gases. In the presence of water, those reactions can produce compounds that microbes use to sustain metabolism. On the surface, these processes are almost invisible. In the depths, they may be the foundation of an entire unseen biosphere. If any microorganisms truly live within Lake Vostok, their existence would redefine what we mean by isolation. For more than 15 million years, the lake has been cut off from sunlight, air, and contact with the rest of Earth's biosphere. If microbes have persisted there, they've done so by evolving mechanisms that no surface organism needs. They might metabolize hydrogen from geothermal reactions, or oxidize metals leaching from the rock. They might use oxygen in small, controlled bursts, buffered by enzymes that protect them from toxicity. Some could even survive by entering dormant states, waiting for centuries between cycles of activity. In that sense, the microbes of Vostok, if they exist, are not just alive. They are part of a rhythm of survival, almost beyond comprehension. The search for these frozen messengers isn't limited to Vostok. Samples from other subglacial environments have provided their own clues. In Lake Whillans, microbes have been found actively cycling carbon and nitrogen, transforming simple molecules into energy. In the nearby Mercer subglacial lake, researchers retrieved living communities thriving under 1/2 kilometre of ice. The diversity in these samples is astonishing. Hundreds of species, some related to marine bacteria, others completely unknown. If such life exists in shallow, younger lakes, then the deeper, older systems like Vostok are even more tantalizing. The pattern that emerges is consistent. Wherever liquid water persists under the ice, traces of biology appear. It's tempting to see these findings as proof of life's inevitability, but the scientists closest to the work are careful. They speak not of proof, but of signals, patterns that require patience to interpret. In the sterile rooms where ice cores are sliced and analysed, each sample is treated as a kind of message in code. The isotopes reveal temperature and chemistry. The carbon ratios indicate biological activity. The microscopic structures, cells, filaments, or mineral shapes, may hint at living processes. Every result must be cross-checked, every possible contamination ruled out. The process is slow, methodical, and precise. It has to be. When the evidence for life is this fragile, the line between discovery and illusion is razor thin. Yet even the act of looking has value. Each attempt brings new understanding of how ice preserves organic matter, how water moves through frozen systems, how ancient environments leave their mark. These lessons don't apply only to Antarctica. They extend to the study of other icy worlds. The microbes found beneath the South Pole may share traits with what could exist beneath Europa's crust or within Enceladus's hidden seas. By learning how to read these frozen messages here, scientists are training themselves to recognize them elsewhere. One of the most intriguing discoveries from Antarctic ice cores has been the preservation of viable cells in ice hundreds of thousands of years old. Some microbes can survive long-term freezing by entering a state of suspended metabolism. Their DNA repair systems remain functional, patching damage caused by cosmic rays or natural radiation over time. When warmed, they awaken and resume activity, as though no time has passed. In controlled experiments, bacteria frozen in permafrost for over 500,000 years, have revived when thawed. If organisms in the ice above Lake Vostok share that resilience, they could still be viable, carrying ancient genetic blueprints that predate much of modern life. The idea that microbes can survive such long isolation blurs the line between life and stasis. In extreme cold, metabolic reactions slow to near zero, but they don't stop completely. The cells remain in a delicate balance, neither alive in the traditional sense nor dead. Over geological time, this allows them to persist through environmental cycles, preserving both their structure and genetic material. It also raises profound questions about how life might travel between worlds. If microbes can endure in ice for millions of years, shielded from radiation and vacuum, then perhaps panspermia, the hypothesis that life spreads through space via comets and asteroids, is more than speculation. The ice beneath the South Pole may be a local example of a universal principle, that life, once formed, resists extinction through endurance. When researchers examine the genetic fragments retrieved from Antarctic ice, they don't just look for familiar sequences, they also search for signs of novelty, regions of DNA that don't align with known organisms. These unknown sequences, often labelled simply as unclassified, are among the most exciting. They hint at evolutionary experiments that unfolded in isolation. Some may represent entirely new species, others could be ancient variants of existing ones. In either case, they expand the boundaries of biology. Each unclassified fragment is like a line from a book, written in a dialect we're only beginning to decipher. The same samples that contain these genetic mysteries also tell us about the chemistry of the environment they came from. The balance of isotopes, ratios of oxygen, carbon and hydrogen, reveals the temperature and salinity of the lake water. Traces of methane, carbon dioxide and ammonia point toward ongoing chemical reactions. Some of these reactions could be biological, others purely geochemical. Distinguishing between the two is one of the most challenging tasks in the study of subglacial ecosystems. Even a small anomaly, a certain pattern in isotopic ratios or a specific compound in unexpected proportions, can suggest metabolism, but proving it requires a level of certainty rarely attainable in such remote conditions. The scientists who dedicate themselves to this work know that absolute certainty may never come. The goal, however, isn't always to find life outright. It's to understand what the limits of life could be, where chemistry ends and biology begins. Every frozen microbe, every molecule trapped in ice becomes a clue to that threshold. The research forces a re-evaluation of what defines alive. When a microbe can remain dormant for 1 million years and still revive, when it can survive pressure that would crush most cells, when it can metabolize metals instead of oxygen, the categories we use to describe life begin to blur. It becomes less about activity and more about potential, the ability to restart, to persist, to endure. In some of the samples from Vostok's accretion ice, scientists have found complex organic molecules, amino acids, lipids and simple carbohydrates. These are not life themselves, but they are its building blocks. Their presence suggests that the chemistry of the lake could support biological activity, even if no living cells are detected. They also serve as markers for how organic compounds behave under extreme conditions. Understanding how these molecules form, degrade and survive under ice helps researchers model similar processes on other planets. Mars, for example, still holds large reserves of subsurface ice, and the discovery of organic compounds there has sparked speculation about microbial life. By studying the messages written in Antarctica's ice, we learn how to interpret those signals from afar. The techniques used to analyse these frozen samples grow more sophisticated each year. Advanced sequencing technologies can detect even trace amounts of DNA, distinguishing genuine ancient material from modern contamination. Mass spectrometry can identify molecules in parts per trillion, revealing subtle chemical fingerprints. Cryo-electron microscopy can visualize structures at the nanoscale, capturing the shape of potential cells or biofilms embedded in ice. These tools turn what was once speculation into measurable data. They allow scientists to read the faintest messages left by microbes that may have lived and died before the first humans walked the Earth. Every discovery deepens the sense that Antarctica's ice is not merely frozen water, but an archive of life. Each layer records not only climate but biology, a cumulative memory of microbial activity stretching back through time. The air bubbles trapped in ancient layers tell us how the atmosphere once was. The organic residues tell us who lived there and perhaps how they adapted. Together they form a kind of conversation between Earth's living systems, carried forward molecule by molecule. For those who work in this field, there's a quiet respect for the enormity of that record. The scientists know that what they hold in their hands is more than data. It's evidence of continuity, proof that life, once begun, persists in forms both visible and invisible. The microbes frozen beneath Antarctica may never evolve into anything larger, but their significance lies not in their scale, but in their persistence. They remind us that survival isn't about dominance or complexity. It's about endurance in silence, the ability to keep existing in conditions that seem impossible. When viewed from that perspective, the ice beneath the South Pole becomes less a barrier and more a kind of memory system for the planet. It holds stories that reach back to epochs long vanished, when the continents were joined, when forests grew where glaciers now stand. The microbial remnants preserved in its depths are the echoes of those eras, chemical whispers left behind by lives too small to see but too important to forget. Each new analysis of these samples carries both scientific rigour and human anticipation. There's an awareness that at any moment, one of those sequences or chemical ratios could reveal something unprecedented, a signal that confirms the existence of a truly isolated biosphere. If that day comes, it will not just be a discovery of life beneath the ice, it will be a discovery of connection between past and present, between Earth and the cosmos, between what we think of as separate worlds. For now, the messages remain faint, carried upward through ice like memories surfacing from a dream. The data continues to accumulate, and the interpretations evolve. The picture of life beneath the Antarctic ice grows sharper with each study, yet still incomplete, still waiting for the next layer of clarity. The microbes, if they are there, continue their patient existence, indifferent to the curiosity above them. They drift in water that has not seen the sky in millions of years, sending chemical signals that rise slowly, molecule by molecule, toward a world finally ready to listen. The story of these frozen messages doesn't end with their discovery. It flows naturally into the next understanding, what they mean, not just for the past of this planet, but for the present of our own species. Because within the smallest cells preserved in the cold lies a reflection of ourselves, our persistence, our fragility, and our endless search for meaning in the silence of the unknown. The samples drawn from beneath the ice do more than hint at what might live in the darkness. They serve as mirrors, reflecting back pieces of Earth's own history, fragments of what the planet once was before it became the place we know. Each fragment of frozen sediment, each droplet of ancient water, each cell fossilized or preserved, tells part of that story. Together, they form an image not only of the environment beneath Antarctica, but of the planet itself, how it breathes, how it remembers, and how it keeps the traces of everything that has ever lived. Looking into the ice is like looking into time, a reflection that doesn't show faces or light, but persistence. When researchers study the data from those frozen depths, what they're really examining are echoes, chemical, biological, and geological patterns that stretch backward through millions of years. The sediments pulled from the base of the ice contain traces of minerals that predate the continent's glaciation. They hold remnants of ancient rocks once exposed to open air, remnants of forests and rivers long erased. In the microscopic fragments of pollen and carbon compounds embedded in those sediments, There are signs that Antarctica was once a thriving landscape, covered in vegetation, home to lakes and flowing streams. The ice that now smothers it is only the most recent chapter of a much longer narrative. That narrative becomes clearer as scientists read deeper into the record. Ice cores drilled from across the continent act like vertical timelines. Layer by layer, they preserve the composition of the atmosphere, trapped air bubbles that reveal how carbon dioxide and methane have risen and fallen over hundreds of thousands of years. Those cycles match the rhythm of ice ages and warm periods, reflecting the balance between sunlight, oceans, and living systems. Each layer is a snapshot, a record of breath. When those bubbles are measured, they show that our planet's current atmosphere is unlike any seen in that record. The numbers climb sharply, the balance shifts, and the pattern breaks. The mirror beneath the ice doesn't just show what was, it shows what's changing. Yet it's not only the air that holds memory. The water itself tells its own story. The isotopic composition of the frozen lake water reveals clues about its origin. Some of it is ancient seawater, trapped when the continent still had open connections to the ocean. Some is melted glacial ice, slowly filtered and recycled over millions of years. Together they create a mixture that reflects the passage of time as much as geology. Each molecule, if traced, would carry a lineage stretching through cycles of freezing, melting, and renewal. When scientists analyze that water, they see more than chemistry. They see a planetary process unfolding quietly beneath them, one that has continued unbroken since long before humanity arrived. It's easy to forget that Antarctica was not always a world of ice. There was a time when the land beneath those glaciers was green. Fossils found in exposed rock outcrops reveal ferns, conifers, and even flowering plants. Tree trunks, petrified but perfectly preserved, lie embedded in ancient sediment layers. Traces of freshwater fish, crustaceans, and microbial mats tell of rivers and wetlands that once cut through the landscape. The continent's position on the globe was different then, close to the equator, bathed in sunlight. Over tens of millions of years, tectonic drift carried it southward, and ice began to accumulate, slowly turning paradise into desert. The transformation was gradual but relentless, a process that rewrote every ecological pattern on the land. That transformation is written in the isotopes of the ice, in the chemistry of its trapped air, and in the DNA fragments preserved in its depths. Together they form a kind of planetary autobiography, one that reveals how climate, biology, and geology have always been entwined. When the ice thickened, temperatures dropped, ocean currents shifted, and atmospheric gases changed. Each shift cascaded into the next, reshaping life across the globe. In that sense, Antarctica is not an isolated world, but a reflection of the entire Earth. Its ice sheets respond to global changes and in turn influence them. The mirror beneath the ice shows us not just the past, but the feedback loops that govern everything above it. When scientists study that mirror, they're also studying themselves. The carbon dioxide levels locked in ancient ice show what the atmosphere was like before industrialization, offering a baseline for comparison. The results are sobering. The gases released by modern activity exceed anything in the last 800,000 years. The temperature trends recorded in the ice cores rise faster than any natural cycle on record. The mirror shows a planet moving into unfamiliar territory, a reminder that the systems we rely on for stability are not static. They shift and they remember. But there is another kind of reflection hidden in the ice, one less about warning and more about continuity. The microbial signatures found in ancient layers show that life adapts even as the planet changes. Species come and go, but life as a process endures. The organisms that once lived in Antarctica's warm rivers evolved into those that now survive beneath its ice. The mechanisms are different, but the principle is the same: persistence through transformation. Every adaptation, every adjustment, is a message written into biology itself. The DNA sequences preserved in the ice are like verses in that ongoing story, describing how life bends but does not break. To look at a sample from beneath the ice, under a microscope or through a mass spectrometer, is to witness the planet's memory functioning in real time. The water, the gas, the sediment, all of it participates in recording. The processes that create those records are continuous. Each snowfall adds a new page. Each freeze and thaw rearranges molecules, locking in new information. The scientists who study these systems are not so much reading the past as listening to it unfold slowly. The mirror beneath the ice doesn't simply reflect. It speaks, in patterns of isotopes, in concentrations of dust, in faint traces of methane or sulfur. The conversation is subtle, but it's constant. That continuity gives the ice a kind of quiet power. It's the only place on Earth where the past is physically layered beneath the present in a way that can be touched. In most environments, time erases itself. Erosion, decay, and growth destroy the old to make way for the new. But under the Antarctic ice, time stacks neatly, preserved by cold and pressure. To drill through it is to move downward through centuries. The instruments that measure temperature and chemistry at each depth are not just taking readings. They're travelling through history, tracing the evolution of the planet's skin one frozen layer at a time. Even the buried lakes like Vostok and Whillans participate in this act of remembrance. The sediments at their bottoms accumulate slowly, particle by particle, layer by layer. Each layer contains fragments of rock, mineral dust and organic matter that tell what was happening in the world above when they settled. In that way, the lakes function as archives of both biology and climate. They record volcanic eruptions in microscopic ash grains, shifts in ocean currents through changing mineral compositions, and even subtle fluctuations in temperature through the types of isotopes trapped in their water. To analyse them is to reconstruct a timeline stretching beyond written history, one that connects global patterns to local moments. It's this capacity for reflection that makes Antarctica both fragile and essential. The continent holds more than 60% of the world's fresh water, locked in ice. Its stability regulates global sea levels and influences climate patterns across hemispheres. When that ice melts, the mirror shifts. The record changes shape, and the future it reflects becomes uncertain. Scientists working there are acutely aware of this. They see the fractures in the ice shelves, the accelerating flow of glaciers, the rising temperatures that creep further inland each year. They know that the mirror they study is not static. It's alive, responding to what humanity does above it. The microbes found in those ancient waters, if alive, may not know the surface exists. Yet the surface shapes their fate. As the ice thins, the pressure that keeps those lakes stable changes. New channels may form, allowing water to drain or mix with other systems. The delicate balance that has persisted for millions of years could shift within centuries. For the scientists, this realization adds urgency. They're not only studying what was, they're documenting what might soon be lost. Even so, there's something steady in the way the ice endures. The deeper layers remain insulated from the rapid changes above. Down there, the temperatures are constant. The process is slow. That slowness is part of the planet's resilience. It ensures that not everything changes at once, that somewhere in the depths, memory persists even as the surface evolves. The microbes trapped in ice, the sediment sealed away, the gases preserved in bubbles, all of them serve as anchors in a world that constantly transforms. In a sense, the mirror beneath the ice does not reflect light. It reflects endurance. It shows that life and planet are inseparable, that each influences the other in a continuous feedback of adaptation. When volcanic eruptions darkened the skies millions of years ago, microorganisms adjusted their metabolism to survive. When the planet warmed and melted ice into rivers, life followed the water. When the ice returned, life retreated into the spaces beneath it. That cycle continues today, unseen but unbroken. The reflection in the ice is not a snapshot. It's a living motion slowed by cold. For the scientists who spend their lives studying these processes, the experience can be disorienting. Time behaves differently in Antarctica. The days blur, the months stretch, and the work itself takes on a rhythm measured in seasons and data sets rather than hours. When they handle samples from deep ice, they're holding fragments of a world that existed before humanity. To know that the air trapped inside those bubbles once filled the lungs of creatures long extinct is to feel connected to something vast and continuous. The planet becomes less a place and more a process, an ongoing exchange between ice, water, rock, and life. How that understanding is what drives so many of them to return year after year despite the cold and isolation. They're not just collecting data. They're piecing together a mirror large enough to show where we've come from and where we might be headed. Each isotope ratio, each bacterial sequence, each mineral grain adds to that reflection. It's not a simple image. It's complex, layered, and sometimes contradictory. But in its details, it carries truth. And within that truth lies a reminder of how small we are in comparison to the systems that sustain us. The mirror beneath the ice doesn't offer comfort. It offers perspective. It shows how the planet changes with or without our consent, how life adapts long after our species is gone, how the processes that began billions of years ago continue regardless of our understanding. For some, that realization feels humbling. For others, it feels freeing. In either case, it deepens the connection between the observer and the observed. The work of interpreting this mirror never really ends. As technology improves, new measurements reveal details that older ones missed. The picture becomes clearer, but the mystery remains. The ice continues to record, the microbes continue to drift, the gases remain sealed, waiting for the next drill to release them. The reflection grows with time, more intricate, more revealing, never complete. The scientists know that the mirror beneath the ice is not there to give answers, it's there to teach patience. The planet's story unfolds slowly, and understanding it requires the same quiet persistence that allows life to endure in the dark. The frozen layers beneath Antarctica don't speak in words, but their message is unmistakable. Everything is connected, everything is remembered, and nothing truly disappears. And as that message echoes upward through the miles of ice, through the instruments and monitors and laboratories, it leads naturally into another realization, one that looks forward rather than back. Because the reflection beneath the ice isn't only about the past, it's also about what comes next. The clues it carries point toward the planet's resilience and toward the future that waits, still locked in the cold, for those willing to listen long enough to hear it. The future of exploration beneath the South Pole is already being built, piece by piece, in laboratories filled with quiet hums of refrigeration units and the glow of computer screens that simulate conditions few humans will ever experience. The next steps no longer depend only on the strength of drills or the endurance of scientists, but on machines that can survive where humans cannot. The focus has shifted from reaching the hidden lakes to understanding them without intrusion, to letting the environment speak for itself through data, chemistry and sound. In that way, the future waiting in the cold is not a single discovery, but a new way of listening. Every mission that has reached beneath the ice so far has left behind lessons. The early drilling efforts proved the technical challenge. Later missions revealed the fragility of the ecosystems they sought to study. Now the emphasis is on precision, reducing human impact while expanding human understanding. Engineers have begun designing isochronous probes small enough to fit through narrow boreholes, powered by compact batteries that can operate for months in the dark. These vehicles will navigate without cables, guided by sonar and magnetic sensors, mapping underwater topography in complete darkness. Their sensors will measure everything from temperature gradients to dissolved gases, They're mechanical arms capable of collecting microsamples without stirring sediment or disrupting delicate chemical balances. The prototypes are being tested in controlled environments, but their ultimate destination lies deep beneath Antarctica's glaciers. Some will go to known lakes like Mercer and Whillans, where access has already been proven safe. Others are intended for the still untouched systems, the ones deeper, older and more mysterious. Each deployment brings new risk, but also new potential. The machines are built to be self-contained, sterilized to a degree that ensures no trace of surface life travels with them. When they descend through the borehole, they'll enter environments that have never experienced human presence. The data they send back will form the first detailed maps of those invisible worlds. What makes these plans remarkable is not only their ambition, but their patience. Exploration here cannot move quickly. Every project takes years of planning, months of transport, and weeks of setup before the first drill even starts. Weather, logistics, and the limited window of the Antarctic summer dictate the rhythm of progress. Scientists often spend more time waiting than working, but that waiting is part of the process. It reflects a shift in mindset, from conquering to understanding, from reaching to preserving. The future of polar research depends as much on restraint as on curiosity. Parallel to the work beneath the ice, other teams are looking outward. Space agencies are watching Antarctica closely, not just for its climate data, but for what it teaches about exploration beyond Earth. The technology developed for clean drilling and sample retrieval is being adapted for missions to icy moons. The autonomous vehicles designed for subglacial lakes are prototypes for the probes that might one day descend into the oceans of Europa or Enceladus. The instruments calibrated to detect faint signs of metabolism under Antarctic ice are being refined for use in extraterrestrial conditions. Each new technique tested here becomes a rehearsal for future missions that will travel millions of kilometers away. There's a growing sense among the scientists that the discoveries beneath the South Pole will prepare humanity for its next great step outward. The lessons learned about contamination, precision, and patience are directly transferable to the search for life beyond Earth. The same discipline that guides a sterile probe through the Antarctic ice will be required when a spacecraft lands on another world. The same humility, knowing when to look and when to wait, will define those missions. The future waiting in the cold is not only physical but philosophical. It asks humanity to grow into an explorer capable of respecting what it finds. At the same time, the data coming from Antarctica continues to reshape how we see our own planet. The measurements from radar satellites, ice-penetrating sonar, and ground sensors reveal an environment more dynamic than anyone once believed. Beneath the frozen surface, rivers flow between lakes, connecting them in networks that span hundreds of kilometers. The water moves slowly, sometimes taking centuries to travel from one basin to another, but it moves. These subglacial systems aren't isolated after all. They form a living network. Understanding how they exchange water, minerals, and possibly life has become one of the central goals of modern glaciology. It could reveal not just how Antarctica functions, but how it will respond to the warming world above. The implications are immense. As the climate changes, the stability of the ice sheet becomes one of the greatest uncertainties in global science. The rate at which glaciers melt, the flow of subglacial rivers, the behavior of water at the base of the ice, all influence sea levels and weather patterns worldwide. By studying these processes now, scientists are building predictive models that could guide how societies prepare for the future. The data coming from beneath the ice is not just about ancient life. It's about tomorrow's oceans, tomorrow's coastlines, tomorrow's atmosphere. The knowledge we gain from those frozen depths may determine how we adapt to a planet already shifting faster than its natural rhythm. But beyond the practical and the scientific lies something harder to define. Something that has always accompanied exploration, the quiet human desire to connect with the unknown. The deeper the scientists go, the more they confront questions that reach beyond measurement. What does it mean to uncover life that has never seen the surface? How should humanity act when it encounters a new biosphere, however small, however fragile? The answers to those questions will shape not just Antarctic research, but future space exploration. They require ethics grounded in patience and humility. The future waiting in the cold is not just about discovery, it's about responsibility. There are already plans forming for an era when autonomous systems will operate year-round beneath the ice, relaying information via satellite through networks of sensors embedded in the glaciers. Each node will record temperature, vibration, and chemistry in real time, transmitting continuous streams of data. The continent, once known for silence and isolation, will become one of the most carefully monitored environments on Earth. Yet despite the influx of technology, the goal remains the same: to understand without disturbing, to observe without altering. Some researchers are beginning to think even further ahead. They imagine drilling methods that rely on heat from focused lasers, or acoustic waves that melt and refreeze ice without leaving any chemical trace. They envision fleets of miniature robotic swarms that can disperse through subglacial channels, mapping and sampling as they move, communicating with one another through low-frequency signals. They talk about long-term observatories beneath the ice, sealed systems that could watch a single lake for decades, recording every change. These ideas may sound ambitious, but so did the first plans to reach Lake Vostok. Every impossible concept begins as imagination. The Antarctic ice has a way of turning imagination into engineering. At the same time, the human aspect of exploration remains irreplaceable. No machine can fully capture what it feels like to stand on the ice, to hear the wind echo across miles of emptiness, to know that beneath your feet lies an entire unseen world. That sensation is what drives people back to the continent each season, despite the isolation, the cold, and the risk. The scientists, engineers, and support crews who live there for months at a time are part of a lineage of exploration that stretches back centuries. They share the same instinct that once led humans across oceans and deserts: to see, to understand, to witness. In that way, the frozen landscape continues to shape not only science but character. There's also the growing realization that Antarctica is changing. The data show increasing ice loss from the western glaciers, accelerating flow into the ocean, and the gradual thinning of ice shelves that once seemed eternal. The cold isn't disappearing, but the balance is shifting. What was once static is now mobile. The frozen rivers beneath the surface are adjusting, moving faster, redistributing their weight. These changes alter not only global sea levels but the internal dynamics of the continent itself. Lakes that have been stable for thousands of years may begin to drain or merge. Subglacial ecosystems that have evolved in isolation may be exposed. For the scientists, this adds urgency and melancholy in equal measure. They know they're documenting a world in transition. The future they work toward is not one of conquest, but of preservation. The techniques developed to explore Antarctica are becoming templates for studying fragile environments everywhere. Whether it's deep ocean trenches, underground aquifers, or the icy moons of the outer solar system, the same principles apply. Minimize impact, maximize knowledge, and always assume that what you touch is older and more complex than it appears. This approach represents a shift in how humanity interacts with the unknown. Exploration used to mean intrusion. Now it means dialogue. The instruments and sensors are our side of that conversation, and the planet responds in data and phenomena, in subtle changes and measurable patterns. For some of the researchers, the emotional impact of their work only becomes clear after returning home. They describe how silence in Antarctica stays with them, how ordinary noise feels strange after months of stillness. They talk about how time slows there, how days merge into a rhythm shaped only by work and weather. They recall moments when the aurora spread across the sky above the station, the ice below cracking faintly like a distant whisper. Those memories are as much a part of the science as the numbers in their data sheets. They're reminders of what drives the work, not ambition, but connection. Meanwhile, the machines continue to evolve. Artificial intelligence is being incorporated into probe systems to allow real-time decision-making beneath the ice. Instead of waiting for commands from the surface, these machines will adapt their behavior to what they encounter. If the sensors detect unusual chemistry, the probe can adjust its path, take samples, and transmit results automatically. It's a step toward true autonomy, a necessity for future missions where communication delays make remote control impossible. These experiments beneath Antarctica will become the blueprint for how humans explore environments light years away. There is something fitting about that. The coldest, most remote place on Earth is also the best model for how we will reach other worlds. The patience required to work there, the respect for fragile ecosystems, the discipline of isolation, all of it prepares humanity for the next era of exploration. The ice teaches not only how to survive, but how to listen. It demonstrates that understanding doesn't come from force, but from endurance and care. The future waiting in the cold will be written by those who learn that lesson. Even now, some of the deepest ice cores being drilled are reaching layers more than 1 million years old. These samples will tell stories about climates long forgotten, about how the planet responded to natural cycles of warmth and cold. The data will help refine models of what lies ahead. But alongside the scientific insight, there's another quieter effect. Every layer of ice brought to the surface connects the present to the past in a way no other material can. It reminds us that the Earth is not separate from its history, it carries it. The act of studying those layers becomes an act of remembering. As the world above continues to change, the work beneath the ice becomes more vital. Each new mission is a race against time, not in the sense of urgency, but in awareness that the systems being studied are evolving. Lakes once sealed for millions of years could open naturally in centuries to come, their contents mixing with the ocean, their secrets diluted. The data gathered today may be the only record of how they were before that happens. It adds weight to every decision, every sample, every measurement. Still, the tone among scientists remains calm, deliberate, and optimistic. They know that discovery is rarely fast and never simple. They understand that the value of this research lies not only in what it reveals, but in how it changes the way we think. The lessons of Antarctica extend far beyond its borders. Patience over haste, observation over assumption, humility over dominance. The same principles that will allow us to explore the hidden lakes beneath the ice will guide us as we venture into the oceans of other planets, and eventually deeper into the unknown. The future waiting in the cold is not a single moment of revelation. It's a slow unfolding, a continuation of what has already begun. The steady accumulation of understanding, the refinement of technology, the deepening of respect. The ice beneath the South Pole holds not only the memory of the past, but the blueprint for what comes next. It shows that exploration can be both ambitious and gentle, that curiosity and care can coexist, and it reminds us that even in silence, the universe continues to whisper its secrets to those willing to listen long enough to hear. And so the work continues, year after year, through cold seasons and short summers, through darkness and thin daylight, through static-filled transmissions and long nights spent monitoring data streams. Somewhere beneath the surface, probes drift slowly through black water, their lights faint glimmers in an ancient world. The scientists above wait for the signals to return, translating voltage and frequency into meaning. They read the numbers, and in them they hear the voice of the planet, steady, patient, unchanged in its intent to be known. The future, still wrapped in frost, waits quietly just beneath the ice. The night over Antarctica does not fall in the way it does anywhere else. It arrives slowly, if at all, stretching across the horizon like a shadow that never stops growing. There are months when the sun never fully sets, only circles lower and lower until the light becomes a kind of twilight that refuses to end. Then there are months when it disappears completely, leaving the continent in an unbroken darkness that hums with wind, and the quiet groan of ice shifting beneath its own weight. The people who live there say the silence becomes something physical, not empty but heavy, as though the ice itself is listening. Beneath that silence, deeper than sound, the continent continues to move. It creaks and flows, grinding forward by centimetres a year. And far below, under all that pressure, the lakes and rivers still breathe in slow, invisible cycles, carrying the memory of ancient life beneath the frozen surface of the world. The quiet beneath our feet is not just stillness, it's activity that happens too slowly for us to feel. Ice crystals align and shift. Microscopic fractures close. The immense weight of the ice sheet presses against the crust, bending it, reshaping it, driving water through channels no wider than a hand. Each droplet moves with purpose, obeying physics that never stop, even when the human world above sleeps. To stand on that surface, even for a moment, is to stand above motion so vast it becomes imperceptible. It's the kind of movement that defines deep time, the pace at which planets change and evolve. For the researchers who spend their lives studying this hidden continent, the awareness of that quiet becomes constant. They walk across the ice, knowing that miles below them, entire systems are alive in their own slow way. They imagine the pressure melting the bottom of the glaciers, the water collecting into pockets and rivers, the faint chemical exchanges that might still sustain life. They know that every vibration they feel through their boots is a piece of that movement, a message from the ice itself. It's not dramatic, not something that demands attention, but it is continuous. It has been happening for millions of years and will continue long after the footprints above are gone. Inside the research stations, time feels disconnected from the rest of the world. The light never changes enough to mark a proper day. Clocks exist, but they lose meaning. People learn to live by routine instead of sunlight, measuring progress in samples taken, data logged, or transmissions received. Outside, the temperature hovers far below freezing, even on what counts as a good day. The wind lifts snow in slow spirals that vanish almost as soon as they appear. Every sound seems to travel too far and then vanish all at once, swallowed by the air. The only constants are the sound of generators, the crunch of boots, and the steady rhythm of breath in masks that freeze with condensation. It's an existence stripped down to the essentials: body, mind, and purpose. And still, in that environment, people find a kind of calm that feels rare anywhere else. There are no distractions, no crowds, no cities, no background noise. The ice becomes a kind of mirror for the mind, amplifying every thought and quieting every excess. The researchers describe moments of clarity when they realise how fragile everything above the ice really is. The cities, the weather, the familiar patterns of daily life. Down there, the scale of the planet becomes personal. Every action feels smaller and yet more deliberate. The act of boiling water, writing a note, or calibrating an instrument becomes a ritual, something performed with complete attention. The quiet beneath their feet begins to shape how they think. It changes the rhythm of speech, the pace of movement, even the way they perceive time. They come to understand that most change doesn't announce itself. It accumulates, layer by layer, moment by moment, like snow settling into ice. The continent teaches them patience in a way few other places can. It shows that progress is not always visible, and that understanding comes not through force, but through observation repeated over years, through care and endurance. When storms come, the quiet changes tone. The wind rises, and the sound becomes a constant low roar, like distant water. Tents strain, cables hum, and the snow moves horizontally in sheets that erase every shape. The researchers retreat into shelters, checking instruments remotely, waiting for the calm to return. They know that the real power in Antarctica is not its cold, but its persistence. The continent doesn't resist, it simply continues, indifferent to human plans. When the wind dies down, the silence returns thicker than before, as if the storm never happened. During those long, dark months, communication with the outside world becomes sparse. Messages arrive hours or days apart. The satellites that connect the stations to the rest of the planet pass overhead at predictable intervals, and during those windows, data is sent, families are contacted, and then the link disappears again. People learn to live with delay. They begin to appreciate the space between signals, the time when there's nothing to do but wait. In that waiting, thoughts slow down to match the environment. The mind adapts to the rhythm of the ice, to the long, quiet stretches that fill the space between discoveries. There's an irony in knowing that the silence beneath Antarctica is filled with secrets. The stillness hides entire hydrological systems, complex networks of rivers and basins that shift under kilometers of ice. Radar instruments detect the faint echoes of their boundaries, but to truly understand them requires intuition as much as measurement. The scientists know that the ice behaves like an organism, reacting to temperature, to pressure, to gravity, to the pull of tides. It moves in patterns too broad for a single human lifespan to track completely. When they map those movements, they're tracing the pulse of the planet itself. The quiet beneath their feet is not emptiness, it's heartbeat. The idea that something might be alive beneath that ice adds another dimension to the silence. Microbes, sealed away for millions of years, might still metabolize at rates too slow for instruments to detect. Their chemical exchanges, their replication cycles, their dormant states, all of it happens at a scale so small and gradual that it defies direct observation. But knowing that possibility exists changes how one perceives the landscape. The ice stops being inert. It becomes a living archive, a biological continuum that spans time instead of space. Every molecule of water, every trapped cell, every mineral boundary is part of an ongoing process that began long before us. In the laboratories back home, when the samples finally arrive, the quiet persists in a different form. Scientists work behind sealed doors, listening to the hum of filtration systems and the click of instruments. They slice thin sections of ice under sterile conditions, examining them through microscopes or extracting the gases for analysis. The air smells faintly of cold and metal. The work requires steadiness, focus, and respect. They know that inside those samples might be traces of organisms that lived in conditions no surface creature could endure. Each measurement is an act of listening, a translation of the ice's language into numbers and graphs. What they find often resists interpretation. Some samples show faint organic signals, some reveal isotopic ratios that suggest chemical reactions, and others remain completely inert. Each result adds to the mosaic of understanding. The data goes into databases, papers, and conferences, but its deeper impact lies elsewhere, in the slow realization that the planet's story is far older, far quieter, and far more intricate than we can imagine. The ice does not reveal everything, but what it does share always leads to more questions. Among the researchers, there's an unspoken recognition that the real discoveries may not happen in their lifetimes. The data collected now will be reanalyzed by future generations with instruments not yet built. The samples will be stored in frozen archives, preserved for decades, waiting for the right technology to read them fully. It's science stretched across time, a relay between generations. Each person adds their layer of effort, then passes it forward, just as the snow layers into ice. There's a humility in that process, a quiet acceptance that some answers require more than one life to reach. The landscape reinforces that humility. Outside, even the simplest sights carry weight. A frozen ridge catching low sunlight, a line of mountains half buried in snow, the glint of ice crystals suspended in still air. These moments become reminders of scale. The human figures on the surface are temporary, small against the horizon, yet they are part of the same system they study, living within it rather than above it. The ice doesn't distinguish between observer and observed. It holds everything equally, recording it all with the same patience. In that awareness, many find comfort. The quiet beneath their feet becomes not isolation, but connection. It links them to every living thing that has ever existed, every cycle of water and air that has passed through the planet's systems. The molecules they breathe may once have circulated through ancient lakes beneath the ice, or through the atmosphere above tropical forests millions of years ago. Nothing in the Earth system is ever truly lost. It only changes form. The ice, by freezing that motion in place, allows us to see the continuity hidden within change. As the seasons shift and the researchers prepare to leave, the silence begins to feel heavier. The instruments are packed, the data secured, and the flight scheduled to carry them back to sunlight and noise. But even as they leave, part of their focus remains below, buried under kilometers of frozen time. They know that the instruments they leave behind will continue to record, that the data will keep flowing, that the continent will go on moving without them. The quiet beneath their feet becomes the quiet they carry within. For those who return home, the adjustment feels strange. Streets seem loud, colours too bright, time too fast. The sounds of traffic and voices feel distant, unreal, like echoes from another world. The calm they found in the ice doesn't vanish. It lingers. It reshapes how they perceive everything else. Some describe it as a kind of alignment, a sense that after witnessing such scale and stillness, everyday problems lose their urgency. The ice teaches them perspective without words. The data they bring back feeds into models that will predict sea level rise, climate change, and the behaviour of the ice sheet. It will inform policies, shape understanding, and inspire new generations of scientists. But beyond the numbers lies something more intangible, the sense that we are, in every measurable way, connected to the stillness beneath us. The deep ice does not separate us from the planet, it binds us to it. It's the base upon which all life moves. Even now, as the cold remains and the work continues, the silence endures. Beneath the ice, the lakes stay sealed, the rivers keep flowing in darkness, the microbes, if they exist, continue their slow, patient existence. Nothing in that world seeks attention. It all moves according to forces older than memory. And above, the wind continues to move snow across the surface, reshaping patterns that will vanish by morning. The connection between those two layers, the frozen stillness below and the constant motion above, defines Antarctica's essence. One world watching, one world waiting. In moments of rare calm, when the air stills and the horizon glows with faint colour, it's possible to imagine that the ice itself is breathing. The pressure changes imperceptibly, the snow settles, and the sound of the wind fades until only the faint crack of ice expansion remains. That sound, almost too soft to hear, feels like the continent speaking in its own language, a reminder that stillness and motion are not opposites, but parts of the same rhythm. Beneath that rhythm lies life, history, memory, and possibility. The quiet beneath our feet is more than physical. It's the echo of every era the planet has lived through, compressed into layers that wait for us to notice. It's the continuation of cycles that will outlast our species, carrying forward the story of water, pressure, and time. It's a presence that asks for respect, not explanation. Those who have heard it once, who have stood above it and felt the depth of its silence, carry it with them long after they leave. The ice does not ask to be remembered. It ensures that it will be, and so the frozen continent continues, its depths undisturbed, its surface bright and cold, its heart steady beneath the crushing weight of its own history. The rivers still move below, the lakes still turn in darkness. The microbes, if they still drift there, carry on their invisible work, bridging eras no human has witnessed. Above them, the world keeps changing, spinning through its brief seasons, unaware of how much it owes to the quiet beneath its feet. The air thins, the wind hums, and the ice holds everything together: life, memory, and silence, bound within its endless patience. Nothing about it is empty. Every fragment, every molecule, every trace of water locked in place is part of something vast. The quiet beneath our feet is the sound of that vastness existing, steady and unbroken, waiting not for discovery, but for understanding, and it remains there still, unseen but present, the calm pulse of the world beneath all that moves above it,